Hey everyone, welcome back to Dark Sleep Radio. I'm here to share real-life encounters with beings beyond our skies, helping you unwind and drift off to sleep. Franklin, Illinois isn't known for excitement, just open land, grain silos, and gravel roads. That night, around midnight, I couldn't sleep. So I did what I usually do, walked out to the soybean fields, phone in hand, drawn by the silent starry sky. The lights appeared at the far end of the field. 3 pale white orbs hovering motionless about 30 feet above ground. No blinking, no sound, just hanging there, waiting. I started filming, zooming in. Then something strange happened. The lights began moving together, drifting smoothly as if connected. They paused, rotated, not the individual lights, but their entire arrangement, then glided sideways with an eerie silence. No drone buzz, no mechanical hum, just absolute stillness. Like the world had stopped breathing. I recorded for maybe 2 minutes, saying nothing, just watching. Eventually, the lights eased back and vanished into the tree line. Back home, I had cell service again. I trimmed the best 30 seconds and posted it on TikTok with a simple caption, "Anyone else seeing this over Franklin right now?" I went to bed, thinking nothing of it. Maybe a few dozen views, I figured. But the next morning, everything changed. The video had exploded. Tens of thousands of views overnight. Comments flooded in from people across the country, Indiana, Missouri, even Oregon, describing similar sightings. Some called it fake, others believed. Around 8:30 there was a knock, 2 sharp raps. Through the peephole I saw them. 2 men in identical black suits, white shirts, narrow black ties, those old-fashioned sunglasses. They wanted to talk. 2 guys showed up at my door. They were identical, wearing matching sunglasses with thin black frames and dark lenses. Short hair, slicked back, same height and build, like they'd been cut from the same cloth. I cracked the door open, keeping the screen between us. The guy on the left smiled first, a wide, lipless grin that didn't show any teeth. Half a second later, his partner mirrored the exact same expression. Something about it felt rehearsed. "Mr. Porter?" The voice was flat, almost electronic, like someone speaking through a speaker with no bass. "Yeah," I replied. "What's this about?" He tilted his head, that unnerving smile never wavering. "Just checking in, making sure you've been feeling safe lately." My mouth opened, then closed. The question didn't compute. "I guess," I mumbled. "Why?" "No reason," the other one said, his voice a carbon copy of his partner's. "You've just had a busy night." They nodded in perfect sync, still smiling. A tightness gripped my chest. Not panic, but that nervous energy you get when a cop pulls up behind you, even though you know you've done nothing wrong. "Who are you with?" I asked. They didn't answer. Instead, they said, "We appreciate your cooperation," and turned away. Their walk was identical. Same stride, same posture. I watched them climb into a black sedan with regular Illinois plates. They sat motionless for a few seconds before driving off. They never mentioned the video. No talk of TikTok or any specific details, just vague comments about safety and a busy night. After they left, I rushed to my desktop to review the footage. The app showed the video was gone. No notices, no takedown message, just vanished. I always back up my files, so I checked my hard drive. It clicked a few times, then died. No response, not even in Disk Manager. I tried another PC in the garage, same result. Clicks, then silence. The BIOS didn't even recognize it. My cloud sync was empty too. Something was very wrong. The house had gone eerily quiet. Not just the usual calm, but an unsettling silence that felt wrong. No background noise, no pets, no kids, just dead air for what seemed like a full minute. Then a car door sound. I looked out the window, but the street was completely empty. Only my truck and the neighbor's old Pontiac sat motionless. I closed the curtains and settled in the hallway, half expecting something to happen. Nothing did. Yet I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched, even inside my own home. Around noon, I tried accessing my TikTok account. The password wouldn't work. I requested a reset link. Nothing arrived. Not in my inbox, not in spam. Even attempts from another device failed, with the system claiming the account didn't exist. Checking video links people had shared became a dead end. Reddit, Twitter, even UFO forums showed nothing, just blank thumbnails or 404 errors. Recovery tools revealed fragments of old files, family photos, random documents, but absolutely no trace of the recording from that night. It was like the file had been completely erased. Later that afternoon, I went into town to find someone who might have witnessed something. At the gas station, I ran into Ben Holloway, a local hunter. When I asked about strange lights in the sky, his response was terse. "Like what?" he said. His quick, clipped tone suggested he knew more than he was letting on. Other conversations yielded little. Most people shrugged or looked confused. One woman at the hardware store mentioned dogs barking wildly around 1 a.m., dismissing it as coyotes. Since that night, I haven't filmed anything. My new hard drive works, but I check it daily, paranoid. I haven't logged into TikTok. The mysterious sedan hasn't returned. The night was clear and vast, stars scattered across the sky like scattered pinpricks of light. It was a Sunday in September, around 10:30, and I was driving home from my cousin's place outside Platte South, Nebraska. My parents had let me borrow their beat-up silver Camry, one working speaker, a cracked windshield, typical family car. The road stretched ahead, a narrow two-lane path cutting through endless cornfields. No lights, no houses, just stalks rising on both sides and the occasional mailbox breaking the monotony. My window was cracked, music playing softly. When I passed a dead raccoon and swerved slightly, that's when I saw it. A soft orange glow emerged from the field to my right. At first, I thought it might be farm equipment working late, but something was different. This wasn't on the ground. It was floating, maybe 20 feet above the corn, perfectly round and smooth, like a sphere glowing from within. Not casting light outward, just burning with an internal orange flicker, reminiscent of fire without smoke. I slowed down, pulled onto the shoulder, and killed the radio. My brain was trying to process what I was seeing. Was this real? My heart raced as I stared, transfixed. The object hung motionless, seemingly waiting. I grabbed my phone to take a picture, but the screen showed only black. No matter how I adjusted the settings, nothing appeared. When I looked up again, it was gone. Completely. No movement, no trace, as if it had never existed. Only my headlights illuminated the road ahead. I drove home, constantly glancing at the fields. What could I possibly tell my parents? A floating fireball? I said nothing, showered, and went to bed. The next day was ordinary. School dragged on, chemistry first period, then the usual routine. But something had changed. Something I couldn't explain lingered in my mind, a memory that didn't quite fit reality. Now, I don't take walks anymore, especially at night. Sometimes I sense something just beyond the tree line, not watching exactly, more like waiting. I was walking home, taking a detour to avoid some kids, when I noticed the car. It sat across from the entrance, black and long like an old movie town car. Tinted windows blocked any view inside, and the engine ran without movement. Something felt strange, not threatening, just unsettling. As I approached the crosswalk, the passenger window slid down. The man inside was unlike anyone I'd seen before. Pale as paper, with short, almost white hair cut military style, he wore a black suit and white shirt. Black sunglasses covered his eyes, even on a cloudy day. His smile was unnerving, mechanical, with lips moving but eyes unchanged. In a flat, scripted tone, he said, "It's not healthy to dwell on things you didn't really see." I froze. My mouth went dry. I hadn't told anyone about the previous night, not even my cousin. My phone stayed in my pocket. The window rolled up, and the car glided away smoothly, turning the corner and disappearing behind the trees. That night, I locked my bedroom door and kept my phone charging with the flashlight app open. Sleep was difficult. The car was absent Tuesday and Wednesday, but odd occurrences began to mount. Small glitches started happening. My phone would momentarily freeze before resuming normal function. My school ID badge would fail to scan, then work again the next day. One afternoon, Spotify completely reset. All playlists vanished, history erased. I only noticed when trying to play music in the car and being prompted to log in. By Friday, things got stranger. I found my algebra binder from lunch with everything inside flipped upside down. Papers remained in order, just inverted. I asked my friends if they'd been messing with me, but they seemed genuinely confused. The encounters were just beginning. I was helping my friend Tyler with our small YouTube channel, documenting weird sightings around upstate New York. It wasn't a serious gig, just a hobby we did on the side while working day jobs in Albany. We'd drive out to locations people emailed us about, take some photos, shoot some B-roll, and upload the content online. This particular trip was to a patch of woods near Midburg. A guy named Len, probably in his 60s, had contacted us. He was quiet and serious, describing something unusual he'd witnessed. Around 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, he claimed to have seen 3 white lights drop below the treetops. There was no noise, no wind. The next day, he hiked out and found a perfectly round ring in the moss, about 20 feet wide. He'd sent us photos of the ground. After that incident, strange things started happening. People around me seemed unsettled. Someone even joked that I must be haunted. I stopped walking alone and stuck to crowds, taking the bus whenever possible. I didn't tell anyone about the man in the car or the strange warning about a fireball. The weirdest moment came the following Monday during a fire drill. We were standing on the soccer field when I noticed someone at the far end of the track, near the visitor bleachers. He was facing us, completely still. Same suit, same hair, same posture as before. When I blinked, he vanished. I asked Kayla if she saw the guy, but she looked confused and said, "What guy?" That night, I searched online for floating light cornfield, Nebraska, but found nothing convincing, just videos of drones, weather balloons, and fireworks. The next weekend, I returned to that stretch of road during the day. The corn was still tall. I pulled over, got out, and walked a few feet in. Nothing was there. No tracks, no burn marks, no equipment, just dry ground and rows of stalks. I've never seen the car again, not around town or near the school. But sometimes at night, I feel a strange pressure behind my eyes, like someone staring through the walls. Now, I keep my blinds closed all the time, even during the day. When I accidentally drive past that field, I try not to look. We drove up Saturday afternoon, parking on a dirt shoulder before hiking into the woods. The clearing was just as Tyler and I remembered from the photos, a bit less defined, but early altered. The ground looked flattened, with moss around the edges showing strange discoloration. We spent a couple hours documenting everything, using a drone and collecting soil samples. Tyler claimed he felt a vibration through his boots at one point, though I didn't sense anything. The woods were eerily silent, no birds, no insects, just the occasional creaking of trees. An unusual stillness hung in the air. We wrapped up as dusk approached and headed home, stopping for burgers and joking about how our friend Len might have fabricated the whole story. Back at our apartment on Western Avenue, something immediately felt wrong. The door handle wasn't fully latched and nudged open easily. Tyler always double-checks locks, so we entered cautiously, half expecting a break-in. Nothing seemed missing. Laptops, TV, drawers all untouched. But every mirror in the apartment had been mysteriously repositioned. The bathroom mirror faced the wall. My bedroom's full-length mirror was turned around. Tyler's dresser mirror lay face down on the carpet, unbroken. Windows remained locked from the inside. We didn't call the police, oddly enough. Maybe because nothing was technically stolen or damaged. That night was tense. Tyler stayed in the living room with lights blazing. I lay in bed, constantly feeling watched. Whenever I closed my eyes, I imagined a presence just beyond my peripheral vision. Around 3 a.m., I got up for water and found Tyler already stationed by the window, peering through the blinds. "There's someone down there," he said without turning. I looked out the window, and Tyler pointed across the street. Under the sodium street lamp, a man in a black suit stood motionless. No coat, no umbrella, despite the light drizzle. His pale skin stood out, and he wore no hat. Arms hanging straight, he stared directly at our window without moving. I asked Tyler how long the man had been there. "About half an hour," he said. "We watched for 10 minutes, and the guy never looked away." I tried taking a photo on my phone, but when I checked, the frame showed only an empty street, no man. Tyler wanted to go down and confront him, but I suggested we wait. After 4 a.m., the man walked away, not toward a car or building, just turning and disappearing around the corner with no urgency in his step. The next day, we both called out of work. I checked the locks again. Nothing was broken. We discussed our options: report it, ignore it, maybe move. We weren't convinced we were in real danger, but we couldn't explain what was happening. That afternoon, we attempted to review the channel footage from the woods. The drone clips were intact, as were the photos and soil sample files. But Tyler's handheld footage, the files showing him walking through the ring and discussing the soil, had vanished, not corrupted, not mislabeled, simply gone. Checking the SD card on both our laptops yielded the same result. No files past a specific timestamp, right around when we noticed the strange silence in the clearing. Just before bed that night, I glanced out the window again. The street was empty, but one street lamp directly across from our building flickered erratically, on, off, on again, as if someone was playing with the power. I watched for a while, then closed the blinds. The next morning, we said nothing. We made coffee and went about our day normally, but this wasn't the last time I saw the man. Weeks later, I was out on the ridge just after midnight, pursuing my astrophotography. I've been into capturing the night sky for years, mostly as an escape, a way to focus on something larger than myself. This late October night was clear, dry, and cold, the kind of night where stars shine with extraordinary brilliance. I'd been out scouting locations near my place in northern Vermont. About 20 minutes from home, I found a small dirt path leading a clearing on a ridge. No streetlights anywhere, just perfect night sky conditions. I brought my old Canon AE1, loaded with some expired Kodak Ektachrome I'd scored at a thrift store. Film photography is something I love. It makes you slow down, be more intentional. I set up my tripod, adjusted the camera settings, 30-second exposures, ISO 600, and started shooting. The ridge faced east, so I was hoping to capture star trails circling Polaris. After an hour, I packed up and headed home. The next morning, I developed the film in the campus photography department's dark room. It's this tight basement space with concrete walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and trays of chemicals. A space that feels weirdly comfortable to me. As I hung the first film strips to dry, the star trails looked great. But then something caught my eye on one roll. Sharp geometric streaks cut across the sky. Not random, but deliberate. Lines and angles that didn't resemble anything familiar. Definitely not airplane or satellite trails. I examined the negatives under the light, blinking, wondering if it was a processing error or scratch. Curiosity got the better of me. I printed a few frames using the enlarger, and the shapes became even more bizarre. Triangles, diamonds, what looked like a hexagon, all glowing faintly white. Unlike the blurred stars, these shapes remained sharp and rigid. My friend Claire, another photography student, thought it might be light graffiti or a film glitch. I wanted to believe her explanation, but something nagged at me. I returned to the ridge the next night, hoping to replicate the shot, but cloudy skies prevented another attempt. Days later, when I went back to the dark room to make more prints, something felt different. The room was empty, silent, waiting. Mr. Carver, the janitor, gave me an odd look when I said hi. Something seemed off, but I didn't dwell on it. Back at my locker, I realized the prints with geometric streaks were completely gone. Not just a few, but the entire set. When I asked Mr. Carver about the missing prints, he told me a strange story. A couple nights earlier, men in black suits had come by after hours. They asked peculiar questions about lights, long exposures, and capturing things that weren't meant to be seen. Their main concern was whether anyone had been photographing the sky, mentioning something about too much light and things better left unseen. The encounter left me unsettled. I checked the lab daily, but my negatives remained untouched, and no new prints appeared. Then things started getting weird. One night, walking back from the campus library, I spotted a black sedan parked under a street lamp near my apartment. Two men in dark suits sat inside, watching. As I passed, their headlights flickered briefly. Strange occurrences became routine. My phone battery drained unusually fast. Fleeting movements caught my eye outside the window, but nothing was ever there. Driving home late, my headlights momentarily dimmed. I stopped visiting the ridge and kept quiet about everything, even hiding it from Claire. An email arrived on my school account one afternoon. No subject, just a cryptic message. You've seen too much light lately. The sender's address was unfamiliar. My reply went unanswered. That night, a shadow seemed to stand outside my apartment, vanishing when I looked closer. Eventually, I moved my negatives and prints to a safer location. The men in black never reappeared, but the feeling of being watched never truly left me. For weeks, I'd been scouring public satellite data, hunting for anything out of the ordinary. My fascination with UFOs, secret military sites, and restricted areas isn't professional, just a personal obsession. One afternoon, something caught my eye, a chunk of land near the Utah border of a military testing zone. The satellite images revealed something bizarre. Perfectly symmetrical geometric shapes were carved into the desert floor, looking deliberate and intentional. These indentations were completely absent from any news reports or online discussions. Intrigued, I downloaded the images, enhanced them, and created a detailed forum post with coordinates, zoomed-in views, and overlays to highlight the mysterious shapes. That night, my mind raced with questions. Who could access this restricted land? Why were these shapes there? The sense that I'd uncovered something meant to stay hidden gnawed at me. Around midnight, an unexpected knock disrupted the silence. Living alone on the town's edge, late-night visitors were unheard of. Initially dismissing it as a prank, I became unnerved when the knocking continued, slow, deliberate, and persistent. Peering through the peephole revealed nothing. When I cracked the door open, a man in a dark, vintage government agent-style suit stood before me. No greeting, no smile, just a chilling question. "What do you think you saw?" Caught off guard, I stammered, "Excuse me." He repeated the question, more like a warning than an inquiry. Quickly, I shut and locked the door, my heart pounding. Something felt wrong. Later, I developed some night sky photographs. Strange shapes appeared on the film, though I couldn't explain their origin. Those men's unexpected visit and the unsettling images made me stop photographing the night sky. It just didn't feel right anymore. Hours passed, and I didn't sleep. My eyes were fixed on the door, waiting for the knocks that came every 3 minutes like clockwork. The sound was deliberate, heavy, with no words, just sharp echoes against the silence. I had tried calling a friend, but my phone had no signal, which was strange since reception was usually decent here. I checked the locks and windows, ensuring everything was secure. Sitting near the door, I listened intently. The hallway looked empty when I peered through the peephole, but the knocking continued. It was like the sound emerged from nowhere, faintly resonating down the corridor. Calling the police seemed pointless. What would I say? There's someone knocking, but no one's there. I wasn't sure if I was losing my mind. The experience was exhausting and terrifying in a way that defied explanation, like being watched, but not in any normal sense. The air near the door grew colder, despite my heater running. A quiet, almost buzzing sound hummed steadily underneath everything. When the first sunlight rays filtered through my window, the knocking abruptly stopped. The hallway fell silent. I didn't open the door until mid-morning. When I finally did, there was no sign of anyone. No footprints, no notes, nothing. Later that day, I discovered the online thread about satellite images had vanished, completely deleted without explanation or warning. I worked as a night security guard at the Mount Kelsey Observatory for almost 3 years, a remote facility about 40 miles outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, perched on a ridge surrounded by pine trees. The whole experience left me unsettled. The man, the knocking, the disappearing images, it all felt like something I wasn't supposed to see. Something or someone wanted to keep me from knowing. The shapes on those satellite maps remained, having somehow escaped deletion, but I won't touch those images anymore. And if I hear knocking at my door again, I'm definitely not opening it. Working the night shift at the observatory was always quiet and peaceful. My job involved patrolling the grounds, checking the perimeter, and keeping an eye out for any potential issues. The facility was located in an isolated area with terrain building for miles, which made it ideal for their telescopes. On this particular night in mid-October, the sky was clear and cold, with just a sliver of moon providing minimal light. Around night during my usual rounds, something caught my attention over the east ridge. 2 bright spheres were hovering silently near the facility, emitting a pale blue-white glow. They weren't like typical aircraft or drones. No flashing, no erratic movement, just steady, intense lights, positioned about 50 feet apart, just above the tree line. Initially, I thought someone might be using spotlights, but these spheres weren't connected to anything visible. Grabbing my binoculars and flashlight, I watched them remain perfectly still for nearly 5 minutes. I radioed the control room to report the unusual sight, and they instructed me to observe but not approach. Suddenly, without any sound or change in position, the spheres began to rise. They ascended quickly, 20 feet, then 30, higher and higher until they vanished into the sky, moving faster than any helicopter or drone I'd ever seen. Within seconds, they were gone. I spent the rest of my shift scanning the cameras and walking the grounds, searching for any explanation. There was nothing. No footprints, no vehicles, no signs of disturbance near the ridge. When I wrote my report, I tried to sound matter-of-fact, simply describing the two bright lights that hovered silently before disappearing. The next morning changed everything. My manager, Jeff, was waiting for me, looking tense and watchful. Before I could ask what was wrong, two men in formal attire walked into the office, their presence immediately creating an atmosphere of tension. The observatory felt strange that day. Two agents in black suits arrived, their demeanor cold and controlled. They carried thick metal badges with numbers, 0473 and 8921, and didn't offer names or introduce themselves. Their unblinking stares were unsettling, almost inhuman. Jeff stood nearby as the agents questioned me about my previous report. I recounted the details of the spheres I'd seen, their movement, the unusual silence, my inability to explain their presence. They listened intently, occasionally exchanging glances, but took no notes. After about 20 minutes, they left abruptly, with Jeff remaining uncharacteristically quiet. Just before exiting, I caught a whispered fragment about restricted airspace and non-conventional aerial phenomena. The encounter left me with an inexplicable unease. Throughout the day, the cameras seemed to experience intermittent static, and Jeff avoided my gaze, suggesting he knew something I didn't. That night, while walking the observatory's perimeter, I encountered the same two spheres again, hovering in their previous location. An eerie silence enveloped the forest. No wind, no wildlife sounds, just a low electrical hum behind me. When I looked at the spheres, one appeared to flicker momentarily, as if glitching. Slowly, the lights moved toward the main telescope dome. I attempted to radio the control room, but my voice emerged distorted through heavy static. For 10 minutes, the spheres hovered overhead before vanishing without explanation, leaving behind a profound sense of mystery. Weeks passed, and eventually the place felt normal again. But I never forgot those eyes. The agents who didn't blink. The spheres that hovered silently in that strange stillness in the forest. I kept working the night shifts, but every time the wind died down and the sky went completely quiet, I wondered if the spheres might come back. I don't have answers, just a bunch of moments I can't explain. And I guess that's enough to keep me looking over my shoulder every once in a while. I was never one for spooky stories or conspiracy theories, but what happened to me that October night near Fallon, Nevada, is something I still can't explain. I'm Jake, by the way, and I'm a bit of an urban explorer. Not the kind who breaks into places for thrills, but someone who's interested in abandoned sites with a little history. The Sill was a few miles outside Fallon, tucked away in some scrubland. It was late afternoon, the sun low and orange, the air dry but chilly with a slight wind picking up. The place is fenced off, but not exactly sealed up tight. You could see inside the opening where the missile would have been stored, just a big concrete hole leading deep underground. I parked my truck on a dirt road a few hundred yards away and started walking toward the entrance. It was quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your ears with only the crunch of my boots on the gravel. At first, everything seemed normal. The concrete walls had cracks and faded graffiti. I leaned over the edge, looking down into the dark shaft, which seemed bottomless from up there. I had my phone's flashlight, but it barely reached the first few feet. Jeff said nothing more about the agents, but after that night, the spheres stopped appearing. Still, I kept feeling watched. At work, the security cameras occasionally caught something moving just out of frame, too fast to be a person, too vague to be an animal. I started noticing odd little things around the observatory, like faint footprints leading nowhere or small patches of scorched grass by the equipment sheds. I told Jeff, but he just shrugged, saying it could be animals or people messing around. Still, the unease stuck with me. I couldn't sleep that day or the next. The strange thing was, the agents never came back. I couldn't trace their movements. The shaft's air hung stale and cool, like time had been trapped within its walls for decades. I readied a rope harness, planning to lower myself and get a better view. Just as I prepared, something flickered in the shadows, a faint glow, almost like a phone or lantern light. I hesitated, then dismissed it as a trick of light or sun reflection. Nobody else was supposed to be here, and I didn't want to psych myself out. Rigged up, I descended about 20 feet. The walls were damp, the smell intensifying, musty, a mix of old metal and earth. The earlier glow had vanished, but my flashlight caught something else. A series of irregular, pulsating blue and white lights deeper in the shaft. I called out, my voice echoing weirdly off the concrete walls. Silence answered back. The strange encounter quickened my pulse. I climbed out as the wind picked up and the sky darkened. A quick scan revealed no signs of other presence, no footprints, vehicles, or lights. Back in my truck, I noticed my phone signal was gone. Not unusual in remote areas, but the radio's complete silence unnerved me. No static, no buzz, just emptiness. I drove toward town, headlights cutting through darkness, with only stars and a distant Fallon glow for company. Halfway home, my dashboard started acting strange. Gauges flickered, and the radio suddenly emitted a low, constant electrical hum. It faded as quickly as it appeared. Arriving home, the weirdness continued. My apartment looked normal, clothes scattered, books stacked, but something waited in the mailbox. A single photograph, no envelope, just a note on the back in messy handwriting. We're not buried that deep. I was on the dock just after midnight filming. The lake was flat, the kind of still that swallows sound whole. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the air had that damp, heavy feeling you get right before rain starts. I was waiting for those lights to show up again, the weird ones I'd noticed the past few nights. My name's Lisa Moreno. A photo appeared on my doorstep that changed everything. When I flipped it over, I saw a grainy black and white shot taken from above. I knew the location instantly, the silo I'd been near recently. But what shocked me was my own silhouette in the picture, standing at the edge of the silo's opening, hands resting on the concrete rim, looking down. How could someone have taken this photo? I live alone on the second floor of an apartment building with no windows facing that direction. The place is locked up tight, and only I and the landlord have keys, and I barely know him. After that night, I kept trying to understand what happened. Was it just my imagination? I went back to the silo during the day, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. No lights, no sounds, no footprints. The area was eerily quiet. A week later, driving by the silo at dusk, my truck's radio went dead again. The sky was clear, the sunset fading. That same low, steady hum returned. I turned off the engine and stepped outside. The air felt heavy, and the usual evening cicadas were silent. Just beyond the tree line, I saw that faint glow again. It wasn't moving fast, just hovering low, flickering between blue and white. This wasn't a helicopter or plane, no wings, no sound. I wanted to call out, but the words caught in my throat. After a few minutes, the light dimmed and vanished into the night. Since then, strange things haven't stopped completely. My porch lights flicker at night when no one's around. My phone glitches. Unexplained pictures appear in my gallery. Just static and unrecognizable shapes. I don't know who left that photo or why someone would be watching me from above the silo. I'm not sure if I want to find out. Ashford, Washington is about as remote as you can get without vanishing completely. My small cabin sits right on the wilderness edge, and I've always been drawn to documenting strange occurrences. Call it a hobby or an obsession, I can't help but record things that don't quite make sense. Last week, something unusual caught my attention while I was out with my phone's camera. Faint lights began flickering over the water, moving in patterns that defied explanation. These weren't planes, bats, or fireflies. Instead, they looked like small orbs hovering and darting in ways that made no logical sense. I decided to capture the footage, not to prove anything, but simply because it was so bizarre. That night, I recorded the lights pulsing in a loose circle above the lake. They moved up and down with an almost deliberate quality, all in complete silence. The next morning, I showed the clips to my friend Jamie over coffee. He suggested it might be a drone, but something felt off. The movements seemed too fluid, and drones don't typically hide in fog. I kept returning to the lake, hoping to capture more evidence. Strange things started happening. First, a subtle power flicker in my cabin, lights dimming and then cutting out for about 10 seconds. Only my place was affected. When power returned, my laptop had frozen despite being on battery. Then my phone began acting weird. The battery drained unusually fast. GPS would randomly shut off, and the compass would spin erratically, especially near the lake. The night before everything changed, I went to bed early, skipping my usual late-night observation. Around 3 a.m., a sound at the door woke me. I'd locked the porch door, which was unusual for me. The noise wasn't a knock, but a soft, dragging shuffle across the wooden porch. Heart racing, I approached the peephole, pulse pounding. I worked the night shift at a gas station just outside of Salem, Oregon. Nothing fancy, just a little place on the edge of town. One night, everything changed. A man appeared on my porch, completely dressed in black. No hat, no gloves, just standing there like a statue, facing the door. I could tell he was looking right at me, even though his face was in shadow. I didn't open the door. Instead, I whispered, "Who are you?" Silence. Just before calling 911, I noticed something on the porch floor. A photo. I cracked the door open and picked it up. It was old and faded, yellowed at the edges. When I looked up, the man was gone. No footsteps, no sign he'd walked away. The photo was of me as a kid, maybe 6 or 7. I'm standing in a park, smiling, wearing that blue jacket my mom bought me that winter. I turned it over, nothing written on the back. That night, sleep was impossible. The next day, I showed Jamie. He studied the photo carefully. "Where did you get this?" he asked. After I explained, he frowned. "That's unsettling." We agreed to keep it between us. Strange things started happening. Unknown numbers would call my phone, never leaving messages. The lake lights flickered differently now. I felt watched, even inside the cabin. One evening, a soft tapping at the window revealed nothing when I looked. I started carrying a flashlight and pepper spray. I couldn't connect the man to the weird occurrences, but something had changed. I began noticing details I'd overlooked before. The fog rolling in too quickly. Power blinking oddly in half a house. Those quiet moments when the world seems paused. At night, looking over the lake, I sometimes see shapes moving beyond the trees. The photo sits on my desk next to my camera. I haven't shown anyone else. Not yet. I work at a convenience store off a highway where travelers often stop for essentials before long drives or venturing into the wilderness. I'm Tyler, and I used to be skeptical about strange occurrences, until that night in early October. The day had been dreary, with low gray clouds and intermittent drizzle. As evening settled, a bone-chilling cold crept in, the kind that seeps through your layers and makes you regret not bringing a warmer jacket. The wind whispered through the trees, creating an eerie, hollow atmosphere. About 3 hours into my shift, I was mindlessly scrolling on my phone when the door chimed. 2 men entered, and I was immediately struck by their uncanny similarity. They were identical in height, build, and appearance. Dark hair slicked back, dressed in perfectly tailored black suits that seemed from another era. Their movements were deliberate and unhurried, yet purposeful. They approached the counter like synchronized machines, avoiding any eye contact with me. The first spoke in a flat, emotionless tone, "Marlboro." The second added, "2 black coffees." I processed their transaction. They paid with crisp $100 bills, and our interaction was mechanical. No pleasantries, no small talk. Just cold, precise communication. Then I noticed something unusual. A strange smell enveloped them. It wasn't unpleasant, but distinctly unnatural, like burnt ozone mixed with a metallic undertone, reminiscent of the air before a thunderstorm, but more intense. As they collected their items, the first man leaned toward me and whispered cryptically, "The sky is safer when it's empty." Confused, I asked, "What?" He simply nodded slightly and left with his companion, the bizarre scent lingering in the store long after they'd gone. I stood frozen, watching the door swing shut, trying to make sense of the encounter that felt more like a surreal dream than reality. The heater blasted heat as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. Those 2 men had left something unsettling behind. A strange smell hung in the air, transforming the familiar store into a place that felt sharp and tense. Days passed, and odd occurrences began to pile up. The sky turned pitch black, completely unlike the rainy forecast. Street lamps flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. I caught a glimpse of a dark shape slipping between pine trees, vanishing the moment I looked again. The security cameras started acting strange. One night, I noticed the two black cars that usually sat in the far corner of the parking lot had disappeared. Even more unnerving, the feed cut to static for exactly 33 seconds before the cars reappeared, as if nothing had happened. When I mentioned this to the manager, he simply told me, reset the system and forget about it." Soft sounds began to haunt the nights, a low humming like a distant machine. I'd step outside to investigate, but nothing was ever there. No movement, no headlights, no people. Then one night, something caught my eye above the treetops. A pale, round light moving impossibly smoothly across the sky. It glided unlike any aircraft, disappearing behind clouds and leaving the night darker than before. My coworkers dismissed my stories, laughing them off as tricks of fog or airplane lights. But I knew what I'd seen. The night had been crystal clear, with no fog in sight. A week after those mysterious men visited, the store felt different, as if it were waiting, anticipating something. The final strange moment came when the bell jingled again. My heart raced, but it was just a woman grabbing a soda. Yet something had fundamentally changed. The entire store felt different, charged with an unexplained tension, holding its breath for something unknown. The night was quiet at the gas station, with the wind rattling the siding around 4 a.m. My shift was almost done, and I was wiping down counters thinking about home. When the door jingled, two men walked in. Same black suits, same slick hair, same blank faces. They came straight to the counter without a word, bringing that cold smell with them. "The sky is safer when it's empty," the first man said quietly, like a warning. I wanted to ask what he meant, but my throat was dry. I just nodded, feeling trapped in a strange dream. They handed me a thick, unmarked envelope. I looked at it, then back at them. "Keep it safe," the second man said before they left without another word. After they were gone, I stared at the door. The cold smell lingered. When I finally opened the envelope, I found a few blurry photos, shots of the night sky with strange lights and long shadows stretching over the trees near the gas station. I still don't understand what it all meant. Since that night, I keep watching the sky during my shifts, waiting for something else to happen. I don't expect those men to return, but sometimes when the wind picks up and the night goes quiet, I feel like something is watching from the treetops. I still work nights here, and that cold smell comes back occasionally, usually right before the sky seems to darken more than it should. The sky might be safer when it's empty, but it sure doesn't feel safe to me. I was driving out in the country when the sky started changing. It wasn't like anything I'd seen before. Not lightning, not fireworks. Instead, colored bands of light began swirling and shifting, mostly greens and blues, pulsing with their own strange rhythm. The whole scene was eerily quiet. No thunder, no crackling, just this hypnotic dance of light above me. I pulled over onto the shoulder and stepped out. Cold air wrapped around me, and fog curled near my boots. The sky was alive with this weird electric glow that seemed to pulse silently. When I tried to record it on my phone, the screen flickered, and the camera wouldn't focus properly. After a few moments, the lights started fading, melting away like smoke until only faint stars remained through the fog. I got back in my car and continued driving, thinking about whether to tell my brother. He'd probably dismiss it as a drone show or airplane lights, so I kept quiet. About 20 minutes later, I pulled into my driveway and noticed something immediately off. A message scratched across my windshield. At first, I thought it was just a smear or dirt, but when I wiped it with my sleeve, the words were clear. "Look up less." I rubbed my eyes, but the message remained, looking fresh as if someone had just carved it with a key. That's when I noticed the black sedan parked down the street, about 50 yards away. No markings, no headlights, but the engine was running softly in the night. No one was inside. I stood on my porch, watching it sit there motionless, idling like it was waiting for something. Unsettled, I went inside and locked the door. The next morning, I mentioned the strange light and windshield message to my neighbors. No one had any explanations. The neighborhood had grown quiet and tense. Strange occurrences were becoming more frequent, and I was at the center of them. No one else seemed to have noticed the black car that kept appearing and disappearing, always with its engine running, but no driver inside. The police weren't taking my concerns seriously. At night, odd sounds began to emerge. a low, persistent humming like a distant transformer, always seeming to originate from the woods behind my house. Then came the night when everything changed. Around 3 a.m., a brilliant white light suddenly flooded my bedroom, unlike any streetlight or car headlights. The room glowed as bright as midday. When I looked outside, the street was empty. The black car vanished. I ventured out into the thick fog, walking down to where the car had been. Silence hung in the air. The next morning, a chilling message awaited me. 2 words scratched into the bark of the old maple tree. Stop watching. I kept this to myself, noting the handwriting similarity to the earlier windshield message, jagged yet purposeful. Seeking answers, I spoke with neighbors. A few mentioned unusual lights in the sky, and one reported his dog barking at seemingly nothing. Something was definitely wrong. An unsettling sensation of being watched began to consume me. Not a physical presence, but an inexplicable feeling just beyond perception. Shadows in street lamps started to look wrong. Late at night, a faint glow would sometimes appear behind the tree line. I stopped going outside after dark. One evening, I thought I heard footsteps in the leaves near my back door. Peering through the blinds revealed nothing but an empty yard, with wind-blown branches scratching against the window. The next day, I discovered something was wrong with my phone. The unease was growing, and I knew something was happening. Something I couldn't explain. I was out by myself on the edge of Devil's Ridge, a little spot I'd found a couple of years ago while hiking near Flagstaff, Arizona. My goal was to take pictures of the stars, drawn by the incredibly clear skies away from city lights. It was late September, with that dry, crisp air typical of the region. Once the sun dipped below the horizon, the temperature dropped more than I'd anticipated. I'd brought my full camera setup: tripod, lenses, and phone. About an hour after sunset, I started setting up, just as the Milky Way began to emerge. The landscape was eerily quiet, broken only by occasional wind whistling through scrub and pine needles. My focus was entirely on capturing the perfect star shot, adjusting aperture, checking exposure, all the technical details photographers obsess over. The sky was breathtaking, dark and densely packed with stars. Then something caught my eye on the ridge across the small valley. A figure, standing completely motionless. My phone and camera started acting strange after that night. The battery died quickly, even though I'd charged it fully. Signal strength became unpredictable, dropping to almost nothing despite usually having full bars at home. Time itself seemed to warp. Hours passed inconsistently, with moments jumping ahead unexpectedly. A few nights later, while smoking on my porch, a black car rolled down the street. No headlights, engine silent. It stopped directly in front of my house, pausing for what felt like an eternity. No one emerged. Heart racing, I stared back until the car finally pulled away, dissolving into the fog. The mysterious messages stopped. The strange lights faded. Everything returned to normal. Yet sometimes, when I'm driving late or sitting alone outside, that unsettling feeling returns. A soft pressure on my neck, a sense of being watched. The windshield scratches have nearly vanished. I can't explain who left those messages or why that car kept appearing. The meaning behind "look up less" remains a mystery. But something was definitely there, something I still can't fully comprehend. The ridge was eerily silent that night. A dark figure stood motionless on a narrow rock outcrop, stark against the starry sky. I couldn't make out any details, just a black silhouette that didn't move or blink. At first, I thought it might be another photographer or a late-night hiker, but something felt off. The area was remote, and I hadn't heard any footsteps or voices. I called out softly, then a bit louder. No response. Suddenly, the figure vanished, not by walking away or hiding, but simply disappearing as if switched off. My hands trembled as I tried to refocus on the stars. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks, or the darkness was creating strange illusions. A few minutes later, my phone rang with an unknown number showing random digits. Something compelled me to answer. The voice was chilling, low, distorted, and cold. 2 words, "We're watching." Then silence. My heart raced as I stared at the phone. Was this a prank? The voice didn't sound like a joke. I decided to head home, taking winding desert roads that seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. The radio crackled with static, and shadows seemed to dance around me. Multiple times, I caught glimpses of phantom headlights in my rearview mirror that vanished when I looked directly. By the time I reached home, I was exhausted and on edge. The next day, I returned to the ridge with friends. We searched carefully for any signs of disturbance, footprints, unusual marks, but found nothing. The rocks and ground were completely undisturbed. That evening, from my bedroom window, I saw a shadow slip between the trees across the street. I tried to convince myself it was just a neighbor or a stray animal. But deep down, I knew something was different. My phone showed no missed calls, no texts. Everything seemed normal, but nothing felt right. My overnight shift at the military base surveillance job has always been pretty routine. I work for a private contractor handling security, watching screens to make sure no unauthorized people get in. The base near Hawthorne is one of those places locals whisper about but never discuss openly, classified, off limits to civilians. About 2 weeks ago, something unusual happened. Around 3 a.m., with the room lit only by monitor screens, I was scrolling through perimeter camera feeds. One particular camera caught my eye. It's positioned on a stretch of road about half a mile from the main gates, typically empty at night. At exactly 3:02 a.m., a nondescript black sedan from the late 90s or early 2000s pulled up without headlights. Two men emerged, but their movements were anything but normal. They didn't walk. They seemed to glide inches above the ground, unnaturally smooth. When they stood side by side scanning the horizon, something felt off. They were completely still. No blinking, no head movements, just rigid observation. I kept blinking, thinking the camera might be malfunctioning. Their shadows looked strange, and their entire presence felt wrong. For 2 full minutes, they just stood there, searching the landscape with an eerie calm that sent chills down my spine. Since that night, I've been haunted by the experience. I keep returning to Devil's Ridge, though I haven't seen that figure again. Sometimes I feel watched, a quiet pressure like unseen eyes. Occasionally, my phone lights up with unrecognized numbers, but when I answer, there's only silence. All I know is that out there in the dark under the stars, something was definitely paying attention. The night started like any other during my shift at the base. I was monitoring the security cameras, focusing on the usual routine, when something caught my eye. 2 men appeared on the footage, but something was off. The streetlights should have been behind them, yet their shapes were unnaturally clear, with no shadows cast on the pavement or nearby rocks. I leaned closer to the screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The walkie-talkie crackled, breaking the silence. Another guard asked if I was witnessing the same strange scene. I described the car and the men, our confusion growing with each passing moment. As quickly as they had appeared, the 2 men retreated toward their vehicle. Their movement was unlike anything I'd seen before. Their feet seemed to lift off the ground, gliding back with an eerie smoothness. The car began moving forward without headlights, then vanished into the darkness. When I attempted to rewind and examine the footage more closely, the feed suddenly cut out. All monitors blinked off momentarily, returning with normal daytime recordings. The entire 3 a.m. recording had completely disappeared. My supervisor dismissed my concerns, telling me to focus on routine patrols. But I knew something wasn't right. I asked other guards about the incident, but they either hadn't seen anything or were unwilling to discuss it. For nights afterward, I stayed near that camera's feed, hoping to catch another glimpse. Nothing came. Days later, while driving home on the same stretch of road, I spotted a car parked silently on the roadside. No lights were on, and no one was inside when I investigated. Local residents began sharing stories of strange lights near the base and unexplained movements in the hills. These weren't typical ghost stories. These people were genuinely concerned. I can't explain what I saw that night. Was it a military test? Something else entirely? The men's unnatural movement, the missing shadows, the vanishing footage, none of it made sense. I continued to work at the base, watching the cameras. The 3 a.m. feed is now under extra security. Sometimes when the night is still and the wind whispers through the dark hills surrounding the base, I feel like something is watching, waiting. And I can't shake the feeling that what I witnessed was just the beginning of something I might never understand. The forest felt different that day. An early fall afternoon with a sharp, crisp edge to the air, overcast skies, and that thick, damp smell lingering from recent rain. I'm Claire, a graphic designer in Seattle who sometimes needs to escape the city's constant noise and pressure. Around noon, I started my hike, planning to cover 5 or 6 miles before turning back. The trail was quiet, with just an occasional runner or dog walker passing by, exactly how I like it. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. About 3 miles in, something caught my eye. Just off the path near some ferns sat a black briefcase, positioned almost too perfectly upright. No markings, no logos, just a plain matte black surface with scratches suggesting it had been dragged or bumped around. Curious, I walked closer. The briefcase was locked tight. No visible combination lock or keyhole that I could find. It looked like a hard shell case for camera gear, but something about it felt off. I tried jiggling the handle, shaking it, but it didn't move. Assuming someone might return for it, I continued my hike. That's when things started feeling strange. The forest seemed to change. The air grew heavier, sounds became muted. Bird chirps and leaf rustlings felt distant, like someone had turned down the world's volume. I wondered if stress was playing tricks on my mind. When I reached my turnaround point and looked back, the briefcase had vanished. Completely gone. No footprints, no disturbed ferns, nothing. I tried to rationalize it, thinking I must be tired. The weirdness didn't stop there. In the days following, I constantly felt watched. My phone battery drained unusually fast. Calls would have strange static, and the screen would occasionally flicker for a split second. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't explain what. I wasn't supposed to be out there that night. As a local news reporter for the Melrose Gazette, I usually cover mundane stories like county fairs and city council meetings. But when I heard about a crop circle that had appeared overnight on a farm just outside my hometown of Melrose, Nebraska, something felt different. It was like an invisible force was pulling me to investigate. Just after dusk, I arrived at the scene. The sky hung heavy with mist rolling in from the Platte River. A recent rain had made the farm's dirt roads slick, with cornfield shadows stretching on both sides. Tall stalks brushed against low clouds, and the air carried a damp scent, earthy with a hint of something metallic I couldn't quite place. I parked near the field's edge, camera and notepad in hand. My editor had given me the green light for a quick story. The farmer, Hank, seemed unsettled, but allowed me to explore. Days later, a strange series of events began to unfold. One afternoon, I returned to a nearby trailhead to clear my mind. As I walked the path, a man caught my attention near the parking lot's edge. He was impeccably dressed in a black suit and tie, with short, neatly combed, dark hair. But his eyes were what truly unnerved me, hollow and empty, like vacant sockets devoid of any life. He stood motionless, watching as I started down the trail. When I looked back, expecting him to speak, he simply turned and walked away, his footsteps silent on the gravel. Something about him felt connected to a briefcase I'd previously noticed in the area. On my next hike, I carefully searched the spot where the briefcase had been, but found no trace. Though I didn't see the man again in person, I sometimes catch glimpses of a figure in a black suit with those same lifeless eyes, just beyond my peripheral vision. Questions consume me. What was in that briefcase? Why was it there? Why did it vanish? I have no answers, only a strange sensation that something was watching, waiting, or attempting to communicate in a way I cannot comprehend. These little things are enough to make me nervous, leaving me with an unsettling feeling that something significant is just beyond my understanding. I walked carefully through the crops, staying on the path. The corn circle stretched about 50 feet wide, with perfect rings and lines flattened into the stalks. Every single stalk was bent but not broken, looking almost too precise, as if someone had used a stencil. The ground remained wet, suggesting this wasn't an old formation. An eerie silence hung over everything. No insects buzzed, no leaves rustled. Only the soft squish of my boots in mud broke the stillness. Even the farm dogs down the road had gone quiet, which felt deeply unnatural. I took photos and scribbled notes, my breath creating misty clouds in the cool air. Something strange was happening with my phone. The battery dropped from 70% to 20% in under 10 minutes, despite minimal use. Maybe the damp was interfering somehow. Stepping back, I surveyed the circle. thick mist swirled in the low light, and tall corn stalks seemed to close in around me, nearly blocking the field's edge. Suddenly, footsteps sounded behind me. I whirled around, heart racing, but saw nothing, just gently moving corn and empty space. Then came the voices, low, calm male tones speaking just beyond my hearing. A question repeated twice, though I couldn't catch the words. Curious, I started walking toward the sound. Two men materialized through the fog. Black suits, no ties, shoes polished despite the mud. They looked completely out of place in a nighttime cornfield. One fixed me with a direct gaze and whispered, "Are you prepared for what's beneath the soil?" Confused, I asked, "What do you mean?" No response. The second man just stared, his dark eyes unreadable. My skin prickled as the mist thickened between us. Before I could speak again, they turned and walked deeper into the field, fading like ghosts into the fog. I called out, but the mist swallowed my voice. Standing there, I tried to make sense of the bizarre encounter. The voices, the cryptic question, the sudden appearance of those two men. The photos started about 2 weeks before the black sedan became a nightly fixture across from my house. I was driving home late on State Route 42, that empty stretch of highway cutting through the edge of town. At a roadside overlook, I stopped to stretch my legs and breathe in the cool night air. The sky was clear, stars brilliant overhead. While scrolling through old photos on my phone, I looked up and saw something hovering about 50 feet above the highway's center line, a dark shape that didn't belong. The next night, around 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, I first noticed the sedan parked across the street. At first, I thought it might just be someone visiting a neighbor. The street was quiet, with only occasional cars passing by. This was a newer model, completely blacked out, clean and unmarked, parked perfectly parallel to the curb. I stepped onto my porch to get a better look, but the driver remained motionless, engine off. I didn't think much of it initially, but when the same car returned the next night in the exact same spot, I grew suspicious. I asked my neighbor Tim if he'd noticed anything strange, but he hadn't. Over the following week, the car appeared every night at the same time, never moving, never making a sound. I watched from my living room window, unable to see through the tinted glass, yet certain someone was inside. When dawn broke, I returned with the farmer and some deputies to investigate the crop circle. But it was gone, not trampled or disturbed, just completely vanished. The corn stood tall, as if nothing had ever happened. No footprints, no machinery tracks, nothing. I still have the photos from that night. The mist looks thicker than I remember, almost like a heavy curtain. I don't often discuss what happened. The circle, the men, that lingering question. Sometimes I wonder if it was just a strange dream, or if I truly encountered something inexplicable. But when the mist rolls in thick over Melrose, I hear that question echoing in my mind, realizing I still don't know the answer. It started with something strange floating in the sky. No wings, no blinking lights, just hanging there motionless. The object was smooth and rounded, blending into the darkness so seamlessly that I could barely tell where it ended and the sky began. Streetlights flickered below as if struggling with some unseen power. I grabbed my phone and tried to snap a few pictures, but focusing was difficult. After a few minutes, the thing drifted slowly to the right, sliding over the trees before vanishing as silently as it had appeared. I drove home, feeling watched, but not fully processing what I'd seen. A couple days later, a black sedan started parking outside my house. Windows tinted, no lights, just sitting there watching. I tried to rationalize it, maybe someone checking out the neighborhood. But why me? I had no enemies, no outstanding debts, nothing unusual in my life, except those photos I'd taken. I kept the pictures to myself, not telling anyone. Something told me to hold on to them, though I wasn't sure why. Each night, I'd see the car, always in the same spot. One evening, I caught a shadow moving behind the tinted glass, the driver slowly turning his head, tracking my movements. Then came the night of the Nen, Ak. Soft, deliberate, like someone wanted my attention without alerting the neighbors. When I cracked open the door, a man in a perfectly pressed black suit stood there. No tie, no smile, just an unnerving calmness that suggested he'd rehearsed this moment countless times. He handed me a plain business card with a single line of text. His whispered message was clear: forget the pictures. Before I could respond, he was gone. The street was empty, no car, no trace of him, just silence and the lingering sense that something significant had just happened. I was out chasing storms in the Oklahoma plains late April, a pursuit that can either break or make you if you're into this sort of thing. I've been doing it for years, mostly freelance now, picking up gigs for local news and weather sites. Nothing fancy, just me, my truck, and a camera. That afternoon, the sky was an insane mix of dark gray and green, the kind that makes you feel like the air itself is charged. I was following a funnel cloud northwest of Tulsa, just off some empty back roads. The wind howled, dust whipping around, and the storm was building fast. I pulled over on a gravel shoulder, set up my camera on the tripod, and started filming the funnel from a safe distance. The cloud was rotating steady, thick at the base, tearing across the flat land. I was focused on the usual stuff, the swirling dust, lightning off in the distance, the way the clouds shifted and twisted. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught something that didn't fit. There was a faint shimmer, like a reflection, or maybe a heat haze, just above the funnel's tip. I adjusted the zoom and got a better look. At first, I thought it was debris caught in the updraft, but this was too smooth, too precise. It looked like some kind of metallic object floating or hovering, catching the fading sunlight in a way that made it gleam. The shape was vague, sort of oval, maybe the size of a small car, but it moved slowly, deliberately, not spinning, not tumbling, just holding position like it was watching the storm or riding its edge. I kept filming, heart pounding, trying to stay steady. The wind was getting worse, and I could feel rain starting to spit. The whole thing lasted maybe 2 minutes. Later, I looked down at a card someone had slipped me. The paper was thick, almost unnaturally smooth. I wanted to throw it away, but instead I stuck it in my pocket. After that night, the black sedan stopped showing up. But the photos stayed on my phone, and sometimes when it's dark and quiet, I catch myself glancing out the window, half expecting to see those blacked-out windows staring back. I don't know who that man was or what he wanted. I don't know if I should delete the pictures or keep them. All I know is that sometimes when I look at those photos, I see more than just a shape hovering over the highway. There's something watching back, and I don't think I'm supposed to see it. The video went viral overnight. Tens of thousands of views poured in, with people endlessly speculating about what they'd seen. Some claimed it was a drone, others argued it was a light trick or reflection. I wasn't sure what to make of it myself. The strange part started the day after. A call came on my cell from an unrecognized number. The voice claimed to be an insurance agent asking about potential wind damage to my brain. At first, I thought it was a joke, but the caller's tone was eerily clinical, like they were reading from a prepared script. They spoke about routine checks for cognitive impairments from high-risk weather events. When I asked for more details, the line went silent and then disconnected. Trying to call back, I found the number was already dead. Then the footage disappeared. My YouTube channel remained, but the video was gone without a trace or explanation. I tried re-uploading from my backup, but it wouldn't to process. Other forum members who had saved copies experienced the same thing. Files mysteriously corrupted or deleted. Weird occurrences started mounting. Random phone beeps with no notifications, fleeting sky reflections, and quick cloud flashes that seemed to hint at something trying to remain hidden. One night driving home, my radio went completely silent for 5 full minutes. No static, no sound, despite everything else working normally. A car check the next day revealed no technical issues. I kept expecting an official contact, maybe requesting the footage or wanting an interview. Weeks turned into months. Nothing. I still chase storms, but now I'm more cautious, steering clear of funnels and anything that gets too close. I was hiking alone in the Bitterroot National Forest, Montana, on a crisp October afternoon. The trail was quiet and less traveled, perfect for capturing the early autumn landscape as leaves began to change color. Everything seemed normal at first. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, streams murmuring in the distance. Then something shifted. The forest went completely silent. Not just quiet, but utterly muted, as if someone had pressed a global pause button. No sounds penetrated the stillness. The air felt heavy, unnatural, like the entire forest was holding its breath. I stopped walking, scanning the surroundings, sensing something was different. In a nearby clearing, a strange scene unfolded. A matte black helicopter hovered about 20 feet above the ground, blades spinning slowly with an unusual mechanical hum. Beneath it stood three completely motionless figures dressed in uniform black. No details were visible, just dark, statue-like shapes frozen in perfect alignment. My hands trembled as I raised my camera and took a few pictures. Part of me wanted to walk away, to turn back, but I remained rooted to the spot. The entire moment felt surreal, disconnected from any normal forest experience I'd ever known. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it all, the metallic shape, the strange encounter, the missing video. But the memory of that shimmer above the scene remains burned into my mind. I can't explain what happened that day, but I know it wasn't part of any storm or standard forest encounter I'd ever experienced before. The day started normally enough, but something was off from the beginning. I'd been in the forest, witnessing something that didn't make sense. A helicopter had lifted silently over the treetops, and then the figures in the clearing simply vanished. No trace remained. A chill ran through me despite the warm air. I headed back to the trailhead, my heart racing. The next week seemed ordinary on the surface, but something had changed. My Monday morning commute started like any other. About 25 minutes through back roads and light traffic, I noticed a black SUV trailing me. Tinted windows, no visible plates. At first, I thought it might be a coincidence, but the vehicle stayed right behind me all the way downtown. I tried losing it by taking several turns, but the SUV matched my every move. At a red light, the passenger window rolled down. A man leaned out and spoke in a low, unsettling voice. Forests don't like company. The words hung in the air, more menacing than they should have been. After that encounter, things got strange. The SUV followed me for miles before disappearing, but its message lingered. Was it a warning? A threat? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Days passed. The SUV never reappeared, but I felt constantly observed. My phone battery drained unusually fast. Shadows flickered in my peripheral vision, vanishing when I turned to look. I tried convincing myself it was just stress, but deep down I knew something was different. The memory of that silent forest clearing haunted me. Those three motionless figures who seemed to belong to another world. I never returned to that part of the woods. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Even now, when the wind is low and the trees stand perfectly still, I can't help feeling those dark shapes are still watching, waiting just beyond my perception. Hi, I'm Jamie Toss from Asheville, North Carolina. I started this podcast almost 2 years ago as a side project. I've always been fascinated by weird stories that most people dismiss as conspiracy or urban legend. I've been doing a podcast about local mysteries for a while now. Nothing too wild, just the kind of stories that make you pause and wonder. Last month, I aired an episode about a forgotten UFO sighting from the 1970s. A trucker named Walt claimed he saw strange lights hovering over a highway near Cherokee and lost time. Official records are sparse, and most locals treat it like an old campfire tale. By digging through some archived audio interviews, I managed to piece together the story. The episode unexpectedly became my most popular yet. But things got strange quickly. The day after it was released, weird voicemails started into my podcast number. At first, it was just static, the kind you'd expect from a bad phone connection. After a few days, something else emerged beneath the noise. A deep, distorted voice kept repeating, "Turn back the signal." No context, no explanation. Just those words, over and over. I initially thought it was a prank. Who would go to such lengths? But the voicemails continued, almost daily, always at night. Sometimes the static would become so intense it would make my phone vibrate violently. I tried blocking the number, but it kept changing. No caller ID, no way to trace it. My friends dismissed my concerns, suggesting it was either podcast hype or just a troll having fun. But something felt fundamentally wrong. About a week after the episode went live, I woke up to find all my recording equipment had vanished. Every microphone, recorder, mixer, and headphone gone. I live alone on the town's outskirts, with no one else who could easily access my space. I checked every entry point. Nothing was forced or broken. It was as if someone had a key and knew exactly what to take. What truly unnerved me was what I discovered on my front doormat. A single microphone, one of my old handheld interview mics, was placed precisely in the center. When I picked it up, I noticed a word carved into its metal body near the base: silence. I was stunned. Somehow, I managed to stay calm, though everything felt surreal. I called the police, but they treated it as a routine burglary, offering little help or concern. I was flying my 1974 Piper Cherokee, a four-seater I co-own with Pete from the flying club. We keep it in a shared hangar, nothing special. It was a little after 7 p.m., and I'd taken off from the municipal strip just outside of Missoula. The weather was good, scattered clouds, no turbulence. I often take short runs around dusk, especially in fall, when the air feels smoother. I'd filed the usual VFR flight plan, got my clearance, and done all the standard checks. Just a routine flight, not testing anything new or pushing altitude. About 20 minutes in, somewhere over the foothills near Rock Creek, I saw something off the left wing. At first, it looked like another aircraft, metallic, round, maybe 200 feet away. Back home, things had been getting strange. A weird message, missing gear, a microphone mysteriously left on my doorstep. No signs of forced entry, nothing that made sense. The voicemails stopped, but my paranoia didn't. I watched shadows, double-checked locks, jumped at every noise. I shut down the podcast, deleted the episode about Walt, hoping it would stop whatever was happening. But something else started. When I tried recording ambient sounds, the playback would have static or low whispers underneath. Nothing clear, just always present. I wiped my phone and computer, reinstalled everything, but the interference persisted. The room's silence felt heavier, like it was watching me. One night, around midnight, I heard a soft, deliberate knock at the door. Looking through the peephole revealed nothing. I opened it anyway and found a small, worn cassette tape on the porch light ledge. No label, no writing. I played it on my old tape player. Mostly silence, except for a low rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat. After a minute, a deep voice came through clearer than before. Calm but chilling, it said, "Turn back the signal." I switched it off, heart racing. Now I'm writing this, trying to make sense of it all. The gear is still gone. The voice keeps breaking through in bursts of static on my phone. The microphone sits silently on my desk, cold to the touch. I don't know what to do next. I've been flying for over 30 years, and I've seen my share of strange things in the sky. But this was different. About 500 feet away, something moved parallel to my flight path, not overtaking me. It wasn't a drone, too large, too high. The shape was bizarre, perfectly round like a coin viewed from its edge, with no visible propulsion, no lights, no markings. What struck me most was the silence. Even in a noisy cockpit, this was eerie. It moved with an unnatural smoothness that made the silence even more pronounced. For maybe 15 seconds, it kept pace with me, then suddenly shot upward at an angle, vanishing into the clouds. I radioed air traffic control, keeping it professional. Just a standard position report, noting an unidentified aircraft. The controller's response was odd. They showed no traffic in my area and no primary radar hits. That's strange, even in a low traffic zone. I completed the flight normally, logged my time, and filed a routine report. I expected maybe a follow-up in a day or two, but nothing happened. A week passed, then 2. No calls, no emails, not even a note from the FAA representative. Then things got weird. I checked the online flight log and found my report had vanished. Not edited, completely gone, like it never existed. I went to the hangar to pull the paper copy, but that folder was missing too. Pete swore he hadn't touched it. When I called the FAA field office, the guy seemed deliberately unhelpful. He claimed no report was attached to my flight, nothing unusual logged. When I asked him to double-check, he suggested I might be misremembering. Something in his tone made me back off. 3 weeks later, early on a Sunday morning, I arrived at the hangar. It was quiet, just me. As I unlocked the gate, I noticed a black rental car parked on the gravel. 2 men in black suits stood beside it, watching. 2 men stood by the hangar, hatless and coatless against the wind. They weren't speaking, just waiting near the hangars with an unsettling stillness. Their presence felt official, maybe insurance or federal inspectors following up on something. But I hadn't reported anything recently, and no one had mentioned an upcoming visit. When I started to open the hangar door, they began walking toward me. Their movement was unnervingly precise, a synchronized, steady pace that suggested they knew exactly where they were heading. Both appeared identical, late 30s, clean-shaven, pale, with matching short haircuts that made them look like intentional carbon copies. The first one spoke, his voice devoid of emotion, mechanical, like a teleprompter reading. "Mr. Wilcox," he said. I nodded. He continued, explaining they were following up on a visual anomaly I'd reported east of Missoula. Something felt immediately strange. The original report had vanished with no prior acknowledgement. "Who are you with?" I asked. The second man's smile was wide, but completely mirthless. "Contractors," he said. "We handle misfiled data." His tone implied something deliberate about the misfile. The first man stepped closer, asking about my health since the event, inquiring about dizziness, confusion, auditory hallucinations. I denied any issues. He didn't seem convinced. They suggested a short leave from flying, just a few weeks to let things settle. When I protested that I wasn't grounded, the second man cryptically responded, "Not yet." Then the first man said something that made my blood run cold. "Still chasing the sky, huh?" Chippy. It was a nickname only my grandfather had ever used, one not recorded anywhere, not on licenses, social media, or official documents. How could they know? They turned and walked back to their car, moving with that same uncanny synchronization. The gravel didn't even crunch under their shoes. They drove away without another word, leaving me stunned. That night, I went back and checked everything. 2 winters ago, in early February, I was out walking Benny late at night. It was cold, but not snowing, and I was wearing just old sneakers and a hoodie. We live in a quiet Spokane Valley neighborhood near Pines and 16, with ranch-style houses and older trees. Not much happens after dark. That night, we were heading back up our street when Benny suddenly stopped and stared straight up. I thought he might be watching a bird or an owl, but when I looked, I saw it too. A massive triangle, blacker than the sky, hanging overhead. This wasn't like any plane I'd seen before. It was huge, moving impossibly slow with just 3 faint white lights at its corners. The silence was eerie. No engine noise, no wind disturbance. It felt like someone had turned down the world's volume. I couldn't hear my footsteps or Benny's breathing. He didn't bark or move, just sat frozen, watching until the object disappeared behind the trees to the north. I tried to take a photo on my phone, but the screen was frozen. It only started working about 30 seconds after the thing vanished. At the time, I brushed it off. Maybe it was a military craft or an unusual drone, one of those strange moments you quickly forget. 2 days later, things got weird. I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night, that inexplicable wide-awake feeling. Then the strange occurrences began. Pete later told me he saw the same car parked down the road, just idling near the tree line. Soon, everything disappeared. Emails, notes, cloud backups, every trace of the original report was gone. Even my local laptop copy had been overwritten, leaving just a blank document with the original file name. I haven't flown since. I first noticed something strange when I was walking past the living room window late one night. There was a black sedan across the street, parked in front of the Wilkins place. It was an older model with chrome trim, just sitting there with its lights on, not particularly bright. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the headlights flashed briefly, a slow, deliberate fade on and off, like some kind of signal. Then, the car smoothly drove away, turning the corner and vanishing without a sound. I went back to bed, thinking it was just a weird dream or someone turning around. But the next night it happened again. Same time, same flash. And the night after that. Each time, the car was slightly different in its parking spot. Sometimes near the Wilkins, sometimes closer to the Morgans, but always directly across from my house. By the 5th night, I was getting worried. I tried filming it, setting up my phone on a tripod in the window and recording from 3:10 for 20 minutes. When I checked the footage the next morning, nothing. The street was empty, but I knew what I'd seen. I'd even waved at the car once and got no response. I started asking around the neighborhood. No one else had seen anything, not the Morgans with their open blinds, not Mr. Harrington, who claims his dog barks at the slightest movement. My wife didn't believe me either. Working nights at the hospital, she'd dismiss it, telling me to stop watching weird documentaries before bed, so I changed my routine. I started walking Benny earlier, just after dinner, but I kept watching the window. Night after night, the car returned, always at 3:17, always one flash, always gone before I could reach the door. I even called the non-emergency line, reporting the suspicious vehicle with its time and description. They said they'd send a cruiser, but I'm not sure they did. About a week into this, I decided to wait outside on the porch. I stood behind the column, lights off, hidden from the road. 2 summers ago during the Pursize, I'd driven to a remote spot east of Lander, Wyoming, County Road 221. Nothing but scrub hills and a broken windmill. An area I knew well from past field work. Benny was inside, pacing. He'd been edgy about me being out of sight lately. My plan was simple. Park the truck off the shoulder, spread a blanket in the truck bed, and watch the meteor shower with coffee and camera. The sky was crystal clear. No clouds, no moon, just endless stars. I arrived early around 11, well before peak activity, but solitude has always been my comfort. At 3:17, a car pulled up across the street. No headlights, just faint running lights. It stopped directly opposite me. Engines humming, windows too dark to see inside, unnervingly clean, with no front license plate. The first few hours had been uneventful, and I dozed off around 12:30. When I woke just after 2 a.m., the sky was illuminated. I'd set up a basic tripod in the truck bed, clicking long exposures. Then, past 3, something odd caught my eye on the road behind me. The driver's side window rolled down halfway. A pale, thin-faced man in a black suit sat motionless, staring directly at me. No hat. I froze. He didn't move either. After about 10 seconds, he raised his hand, not a wave, but a flat stop signal, then slowly rolled the window back up. The car pulled away without flashing lights. That was the last time I saw it. The next few nights I kept watch. Nothing came. No headlights, no idling, just an empty street. I told myself I was relieved, but secretly, I missed its predictability. Now I habitually check the street at 3:17. Sometimes I swear I hear a car idling down the block, but when I look, there's nothing there. I was out taking night photos, setting up my tripod when something caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, but it didn't move when I did. Standing dead center on the road about 50 feet back was a silhouette, maybe a person. No flashlight, no movement, just a dark shape. I kept watching, wondering if someone had pulled over, but there was no sound, no car, no footsteps on the gravel. This figure, if it was even human, didn't shift or turn like a normal person would. I switched on my headlamp and pointed it toward them. The beam lit up the road and shoulder, but somehow missed their face. They didn't react. No flinching, no shielding their eyes, no stepping back. Quick as I could, I snapped a photo. No zoom, just one shot before the light started fading. The moment the shutter clicked, they turned and walked into the darkness. Completely silent, disappearing behind the low slope across the road. I considered walking closer to see if they needed help and called out. No answer. Chasing someone through the brush in the middle of nowhere didn't seem smart, so after a minute, I went back to my truck. Checking the photo later, I saw a thin figure. Too tall, wearing something dark. The arms looked strange, too long. The head was odd, almost featureless, like the face was blurred or turned away. I told myself it was just a camera trick, but it unnerved me more than I wanted to admit. The next morning, stopping for gas in Riverton, things got weird. Early morning, around 7 a.m. The station was empty except for the cashier. As I dried my hands in the bathroom, the door opened. A man in a crisp black suit stepped in. Mid-40s, pale skin, top button fastened, no tie. His shoes were immaculate. He didn't look like he belonged. Standing by the sinks, he said without looking at me, "You've seen too much light lately." I laughed, thinking it was some strange joke. Then he turned, looked me straight in the eyes, and my stomach dropped. I was at Deep Creek Lake in October during the off-season with my girlfriend Mallory. Most rentals were boarded up for winter, and it was too cold for swimming, but I've always loved the place when it's quiet. We weren't doing anything fancy, just a 2-day break, staying in a small roadside motel a few miles from the state park entrance. The kind of place with one ice machine and paper-thin walls. That first night, we drove into the park to look at the stars. There's a boat launch area near the lake's north end with a decent-sized gravel lot, completely unlit. No other cars were there when we pulled in, just us and the water. It was around 11, cold but not freezing. Mallory brought a blanket, and we sat on the car's hood, sipping coffee from a thermos, listening to the wind. Later, something strange happened at a gas station. His eyes didn't look right. The color seemed off, like the irises were too pale or the pupils too big. Not fake, just not right. He held out his hand. "Your phone," he said. I didn't move. When he stepped closer, he calmly stated, "You took a picture. Give me the device." There was no threat in his voice, just a flat certainty, like he already knew I would comply. And I did. I don't know why. I pulled out my phone and handed it to him. He looked at the lock screen, tapped in the code, a code I never told him, then turned and left the bathroom. I followed him out into the store, but he was gone. Completely gone. No footsteps, no sound, nothing. The cashier remained at the counter, flipping through a flyer, not even looking up. When I asked if he saw anyone walk out, he said no one had come in. I checked the parking lot. No black car, no weird SUV, no sign of anything. Just me in the truck. I stood there for 5 minutes, trying to understand what had just happened. Then I noticed the phone was back in my back pocket. I hadn't felt him put it there, hadn't seen him come near me. When I unlocked it, everything was wiped. Camera roll, texts, downloads, all gone. Factory reset. The only thing left was my contacts synced from the cloud. The photo I took? Vanished. Not even in the backup folder. That night, I plugged the phone into my laptop to be sure. I ran recovery software. Nothing. The metadata showed a hard reset had been done at 7:14 a.m., the exact time I was in that gas station bathroom. I haven't talked about this with many people. Those I did tell assumed I'd fallen asleep and dreamed part of it, but I know I didn't. That stretch of road, I've never gone back. The lake was pitch black, barely visible through the darkness. A faint tree line blended into the sky, creating an indistinguishable horizon. We'd been sitting there about 20 minutes when something caught our attention. What I first thought was fog seemed different, moving with purpose, rising deliberately from the water's surface. We both straightened up, watching a massive shape emerge. Wide and dark, it lifted silently from the lake bottom, without splashing or floating. No mechanical sounds, no lights, just this enormous angular object rising slowly. Mallory asked if it was a blimp, but it wasn't. More like a stretched wedge with a completely flat underside. It rose about 50 feet and hovered motionlessly. We remained absolutely still, struck by the unnatural silence. No humming, no wind, no water sounds. The complete quiet felt more unsettling than any noise. Then it started moving, not toward or away from us, but gliding sideways just feet above the lake's surface. It passed the distant tree line and vanished into the darkness as if it had never existed. We sat frozen for a moment. "We should go," Mallory finally said. We packed up, got in the car, and I made a quick U-turn toward the exit. That's when we discovered the note tucked under the windshield wiper. I hadn't seen anyone approach. No footsteps, no lights. It definitely hadn't been there when we arrived. Mallory picked up the plain white paper. In blocky capital letters, it read, "Keep driving next time." No signature, no personal touch. The drive back to the motel was silent. Early the next morning, I went to the lobby for coffee. The space was nearly empty, just the desk clerk and another man sitting by the fake fireplace. He wore a black suit, dark tie, and sunglasses, despite the dim light. Strangely, he held his newspaper upside down, seemingly unbothered. I went back to the room after getting coffee. Mallory was getting dressed when I walked in. I told her about the guy with the newspaper, who was still upside down and hadn't even glanced my way. She laughed at first, but her face changed when she realized I wasn't joking. We decided to check out early. I went to warm up the car while she settled the bill. When she came out, she said the guy had followed her out of the lobby and stood just outside the front door while she got into the car. He didn't say anything, didn't even hold the door, just walked behind her, stopped, and stared. He didn't follow us when we left, at least not that we saw. On the drive back, we didn't talk about it much. Every time we tried, it just felt off, like the words didn't quite land. I remember Mallory saying, "Let's just get home." And that was that. Later that week, I went back to look at my dash cam footage from that night. I'd left it running by accident. It captured the drive-in, the parked timestamp, and then nothing. Blank screen for 2 hours. Then it picked back up when we started driving out again. I checked the file details. The missing time wasn't erased, it was just black. No audio, no video, just dead air. I still have the note. It's in my glove compartment. It all started with a paper for my Modern American Myth course. I'm not even that into UFOs or anything. I just picked the topic because I thought it'd be easy to find sources and weird enough to keep me interested. The professor, Dr. Luring, said we had to tie the myth to a real historical event. So I settled on the 1977 Broadbrook sightings, a cluster of reports in upstate Connecticut. My school's only a couple hours from there. I dug into local archives, library newspaper reels, old message boards. It was mostly just fuzzy lights and secondhand stories. Nothing that different from the usual. A couple of farmers said their cows acted strange. Someone swore their watch stopped for exactly 40 minutes. That kind of thing. But what caught my attention were these brief mentions in two of the old articles, like barely more than a sentence, about a pair of federal men visiting locals afterward. They weren't described, not even named, just sort of dropped in there. I figured it was probably just local cops or reporters, exaggerating, but I made a note to look into it. The weekend before, I'd reached out to some regional historians. Vince Halbrook, one of them, had suggested a microfilm archive in Springfield I was planning to visit that Friday. But everything changed Tuesday night around 8:20 p.m. I was at my desk in the dorm, half watching TV with my roommate Aaron and finishing some notes when an email landed in my inbox. The sender was Dr. Harlan Oakes from an unfamiliar email address, oakes.faculty.edu. I'd never heard of him. The subject line was simply, "Stop." The message was cryptic and direct. "You are looking in the wrong places. There are things that are not meant to be named. Move on. This is your only warning." No greeting, no signature, no attachments. Curious, I looked up Southern University of New Hampshire. No Dr. Harlan Oakes existed in their staff directory. I checked the email headers. Everything looked legitimate. It had passed through normal campus filters with no signs of spoofing. I showed Aaron the message. He shrugged it off. "Someone's probably just messing with you. Maybe someone from class knows about my research." Minutes later, the fire alarm erupted. Not just in our section, but the entire dorm building. Loud, shrill alarms and strobing red lights sent everyone outside into the cold, early March night. In the courtyard, students stood around in sweats and hoodies on the wet pavement. That's when I saw them. Two men across the street, completely still. Black suits, short black coats, dark ties. One wore sunglasses despite the darkness. They weren't talking or moving, no phones, no gestures, just standing there, staring directly at me. I glanced around. No one else seemed to notice them. Aaron next to me was scrolling Instagram. When I pointed them out, he turned to look, but they had vanished. No sound, no movement, just gone. Back inside, I checked my email. The message from Dr. Oakes had disappeared completely. Not in my inbox, not in trash, nowhere. I dropped my research paper about an unusual email that seemed to vanish into thin air. After exhaustive searches through every folder on my laptop and Campus IT's investigation, the message had completely disappeared. The IT help desk confirmed no record existed of the email ever passing through the university's servers. Something felt wrong about the whole situation. For the rest of the semester, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, uneasy. I ultimately switched my paper topic to Elvis sightings in the 80s. Driving back from Las Vegas to LA late one night, the Mojave Desert stretched endlessly around me. Dark asphalt cut through a landscape of scrub and cacti, silent and empty. Around 1 a.m., a figure caught my eye standing on the highway shoulder, seemingly waving. At first, I thought someone might need help, but something felt off. The figure was a man in a black suit, standing completely still. As I approached, I realized his wave wasn't a typical distress signal. His hand was rigid, palm out, face blank and unsettling. He seemed almost unreal, watching me in a way that wasn't quite human. I drove past, a chill running through me despite the desert heat. Immediately, my GPS went haywire. The screen flickered and went black, then reset. Instead of continuing to LA, it redirected me back toward the exact spot where I'd seen the strange figure. No matter how many times I tried to enter my destination, the GPS kept looping me back to that same location. I was driving home late one Sunday night after spending the weekend at my friend Emma's cabin up in the Cascades. Early November brought a chill where you could see your breath, though the roads hadn't iced over yet. I left Emma's place around 10:30 p.m., eager to get back to Seattle before it got too late. The route from the cabin to the highway wound through forest roads, tall firs lining both sides with barely anything else around. The moon was barely visible, and the sky remained clear, except for a strange thin layer of fog hanging low over the trees. I was listening to an old playlist on the radio, tuned to a classic rock station that faded in and out up there. About 20 minutes into the drive, the signal started to behave oddly. The music would pause for a few seconds, then restart with a burst of static. Suddenly, I saw a man standing on the side of the highway. I pulled over and shut off the car to check my phone for signal, but there was none. No bars, no Wi-Fi. It felt like I'd been completely cut off from everything. I rebooted the car's system, but nothing changed. The GPS insisted on sending me back to that exact spot. After sitting there for a few minutes, I noticed the desert had gone unnaturally quiet. No crickets, no wind, no cars, just silence. The air felt heavy, like before a storm, though the sky remained clear and full of stars. I turned on my headlights and scanned the shoulder again. No one was there, no sign the man had ever been. Panic began to creep in. I forced myself to start driving again, ignoring the GPS. I took a side road I recognized from an earlier map, hoping it would break me out of this strange loop. Hours later, I checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town. Exhausted and shaken, I tried to convince myself I was just tired and stressed. Just after midnight, the phone in my room rang. I didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. A calm, cold voice spoke. "You were right not to stop. Not everyone is." The line went dead. I stared at the receiver for a long time before hanging up. Sleep didn't come easily that night. The next morning, my GPS worked fine again. I left the motel heading home, but my mind kept returning to that figure on the side of the road, the mysterious loop, and the cryptic phone call. I still don't know who he was or what he wanted, but one thing was certain: I'm glad I didn't stop. The road was empty, stretching out before me with no other cars in sight. My phone had no signal, leaving me disconnected from the world. Static crackled through the radio, which had suddenly gone dead after a burst of noise. Something caught my eye above the tree line, a strange light hovering motionless in the sky. The light was unlike anything I'd seen before. About the size of a headlight, it glowed softly and moved with an unnatural slowness. Minutes passed, and it barely shifted position, just a subtle drift of an inch or two. No blinking lights, no sound. I kept expecting it to move like a normal aircraft, but it remained suspended, almost frozen in place. I tried rationalizing what I was seeing. A helicopter? A drone? A weather balloon? But nothing matched. The complete silence and unusual movement defied explanation. The light seemed to pulse occasionally, brightening and dimming without any consistent rhythm. I found myself unable to look away, my eyes locked on this mysterious glow. After about 15 minutes, I pulled into Maples Fuel, an old-fashioned gas station with flickering neon lights and a small convenience store. I needed coffee and a bathroom break, anything to clear my head. As I stepped out of the car, the cold air hit me, and I could still see the light hanging above the trees in the parking lot. While filling my tank, a man in a plain black suit approached the pump next to mine. He looked to be in his late 40s, clean-shaven, with a calm and collected demeanor. Without warning, he glanced over and said quietly, "Some lights are meant to be ignored." Caught off guard, I asked, "What?" He simply shrugged, leaving me with more questions than answers. The rest of the drive home was tense, my eyes constantly scanning the sky through the windshield, searching for that light to reappear. But nothing. When I finally arrived, the house was silent, and as I shut the door, a strange weight settled in my chest. I never shared this experience with Emma or anyone else. It felt too bizarre to explain. Sometimes the memory haunts me. The light moved in a way I'd never seen before, and the man's cryptic words keep echoing. Some lights are meant to be ignored. Since that night, I haven't looked at the sky the same way. It started at the pump, where he leaned over and asked, "You saw it too, didn't you?" Words caught in my throat, and I could only nod. He gave a half smile, then walked into the store. The door closed with an unnatural mechanical clang that felt wrong. Inside, I grabbed a coffee, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. When I glanced out the window, the light was gone. The sky was dark and empty. I asked the cashier if anything strange had been happening, but she just shrugged. "People come and go all the time," she said. "Nothing out of the ordinary." Late September in northern Minnesota brought a crisp edge to the air, signaling fall's approach. I'd been in the clearing since dawn, walking the perimeter and taking notes on the forest's activity. The silence was punctuated only by cicadas and rustling dry leaves. Something felt different that morning. Just as I was about to pack up and return to the research station, I noticed something unusual: a series of perfectly round scorch marks in the dirt. About 2 feet across, 6 or 7 of them formed a rough circle approximately 15 feet in diameter. The marks were deeply embedded, the soil beneath blackened and cracked. Strangely, no surrounding trees or plants showed any signs of damage. The forest was eerily silent that day. Clean, symmetrical scorch marks stretched across the ground, unlike anything I'd ever encountered in my years of fieldwork. They looked like a giant, precise cookie cutter had pressed into the earth, leaving no damaged branches or burned leaves around them. I circled the area carefully, searching for any clues, footprints, tire tracks, signs of human activity. Nothing. I documented everything meticulously: photos, sketches, soil samples. My GPS marked the location, and I radioed the station with a brief report. My colleagues suggested possibilities like a lightning strike or animal territorial marking, but something felt off. The marks were too perfect, too deliberate. A strange unease settled over me. I kept glancing over my shoulder, sensing an unseen presence watching me. Days later, an unexpected visitor arrived at my research cabin. A tall man in a stark black suit that seemed wildly out of place in the wilderness. No badge, no identification, just an intense, steady gaze. "I'm interested in patterns in non-human behavior," he said without preamble. His voice was flat, emotionless. When I showed him the photographs of the scorch marks, he studied them with clinical detachment. Then he began asking incredibly specific questions about my research, the animals I tracked, the data I collected. His questions were precise, almost surgical. Something about his demeanor made me increasingly uncomfortable. His unwavering focus, the way he seemed to analyze every nuance of my responses, felt deeply unnerving. Despite knowing exactly where the clearing was located, he declined my offer to guide him there, claiming he had his own methods. After nearly an hour of this unsettling interaction, he simply left without another word, leaving me with more questions than answers. I was up early, around 5 a.m., the kind of person who likes to catch the river when it's calm, especially in late spring around Seattle. I'd taken my usual walk along the Green River Trail, just a couple blocks from my place in Quila. At that hour, it's quiet, mostly just water sounds and the occasional bird waking up. The morning was foggy, thick, low-hanging mist, making everything soft and blurry. As I walked with hands in my jacket pockets, eyes mostly on the path, a weird glow caught my attention just over the water. It wasn't the sun, too early, and the sky remained gray and clouded. The glow was low, maybe 10 feet above the river's surface, moving slowly upstream against the current. I thought it might be a reflection from fishing lights or a boat, but there was nothing usual. No boat, no sound. This pale blue-green light just hovered, shifting gently like it was floating on the mist itself. I stopped and stared, blinking to confirm I wasn't imagining things. No noise, no buzzing, no humming. Just that strange steady glow moving slowly along the water, barely making a ripple. The whole river seemed to hold its breath. Something felt wrong, like disturbing it would be a bad idea. So I kept walking, glancing back occasionally until the fog swallowed it. Days later, that moment kept replaying. The silence of that morning, the unnatural glow, the way it moved without explanation. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, something not quite right. Some nights, when the wind rustles the trees just so, I swear I can hear a low hum, not like any animal or machine, just a faint vibration under the forest's skin. I remembered the man who had walked away through the trees, his steps almost too quiet for the soft forest floor. After he left, I double-checked my equipment, my locks, everything. Nothing was missing, but the feeling that something wasn't right lingered. I kept returning to that memory, always looking for changes, new marks, anything unusual, but nothing ever appeared again. I never saw the man again. No calls, no messages, just that one visit and a persistent sense that whatever was out there wasn't interested in me, but it was watching. The morning was still dark when I arrived home around 6, craving coffee and feeling drowsy. As I pulled up to my townhouse, something immediately felt wrong. The front door stood slightly ajar, just open enough that I could glimpse inside from the street. My heart raced. I always lock my door, especially at night. Standing motionless, I listened intently. No sounds, no footsteps, no voices. The neighborhood remained eerily quiet, with only distant cars breaking the silence. I texted my brother Mark, a police officer. "Door's open. Don't come over, but might need you to check this out." Then, taking a deep breath, I pushed the door fully open and stepped inside. Everything appeared normal. Couch cushions untouched, TV off, no signs of disturbance. But the clocks caught my attention. Every single one, the wall clock, bedside alarm, microwave, read exactly 3:33. This unnerved me. These clocks were never perfectly synchronized. They typically varied by a few minutes. The precise alignment made no sense. I considered a power outage, but the lights were stable, and my phone showed a full charge with no warnings. I called Mark, explaining the situation. He offered to stop by after his shift, but I downplayed the urgency. Throughout the day, I became hyper-vigilant. I changed the door keypad code, repeatedly checked locks, and moved around the house more than usual. The silence felt different, heavier, more oppressive. That evening, I took my routine walk in the neighborhood park across the street. At the far end near the playground, a man sat on a bench. His attire seemed out of place. A black suit more suited to a funeral or business meeting than a suburban park on a Tuesday night. He was reading a newspaper, but something was off. As I approached, I realized the pages were completely blank. No text, no images, just pristine white sheets, meticulously folded. When our eyes met, his were dark and unreadable. I was out camping with Mike in the White Mountains for a couple of nights. Nothing out of the ordinary, just some beers, hiking during the day, typical camping stuff. The sky was cold but clear that night, and we'd built a fire near our tent clearing. Around midnight, we decided to kick back and stargaze. That's when we noticed the light. At first, it looked like a faint glow above the trees, similar to how moonlight sometimes casts shadows on treetops. But this was different. A narrow beam, almost like a flashlight or searchlight, and it's moving slowly side to side and sweeping over the pine branches. What really struck us was the complete silence. No helicopter buzz, no drone hum, no motor noise. It just glided through, gauged the air, scanning the forest, as if searching for something. Mike nudged me and whispered, "What the hell is that?" I had no answer. We watched it for about 5 minutes. The light moved smoothly and steadily, occasionally catching on branches or tree bark and casting weird shadows. Then suddenly, it stopped, hovering maybe 50 feet above the treetops, shining straight down. After a few seconds, it blinked out like someone had flipped a switch. We just stared at each other, frozen. "Did you hear anything?" I asked. Mike shook his head. The silence felt heavy, like something was pressing on us from the surrounding woods. We didn't say much after that. Days later, strange things started happening. I'd catch myself staring at clocks longer than usual. Sometimes, sitting on the couch or making coffee, I'd get this feeling of being watched from just outside the window, though no one was there. One evening, I encountered a person who gave me an unsettling feeling. Their presence seemed to make the air colder. I nodded politely and kept walking. When I got home, I locked every door twice and checked the windows repeatedly. Over the next few days, nothing overtly strange occurred. No mysterious river lights, no unexplained open doors, no silent bench sitters. But something felt off. I haven't told anyone about what happened. I'm not even sure I want to. I don't know what I saw that morning on the river or why my door was unlocked, but it all feels connected somehow. I was driving back from a week-long trip through the Mojave Desert, trying to clear my head. My name's Eric, and I work in software support, which means sitting behind a screen all day. I needed to get outside. This trip was mostly just me, my old Jeep, and a map. No real plan, just driving through empty places, staying off the main highways. On the last night, I was somewhere near Baker, California, coming back toward the 15th. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, and the sky was that deep blue you only get in the desert at dusk. The air had cooled down, but the day's heat still hung close to the ground. The roads were nearly empty, just me and the headlights cutting through the dark. About 40 miles outside Baker, I noticed a car behind me. It was a black sedan, something pretty standard looking. No logos or anything. I glanced in the rearview mirror and caught a blurry glimpse of the driver's face, like a man, but couldn't make out features. I figured maybe it was coincidence, just someone driving the same way. But I kept getting this uneasy feeling. I sped up, thinking maybe I was imagining things, or maybe they'd just pass me. But the car stayed right there, matching my speed perfectly. The next day, we tried to figure out if it was some park service thing or maybe a drone test. We called the ranger station, but they said no one had anything scheduled for that area. No notices, no reports. Weeks passed. We didn't bring it up. It was like we both wanted to pretend it never happened. Then about 3 months later, I got the email. The sender was just listed as control. No name, no address, just that word. The subject line was blank. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a short message, just one sentence. No need to share what you never understood. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, not sure what to do. A little while later, Mike texted me. He'd gotten the same email from the same sender. Neither of us had any clue who it was. I didn't tell anyone else. Not my family, not my coworkers. It felt like some kind of message meant only for us. Sometimes I think back to that night, the quiet, the beam, the way it moved without sound. What were we supposed to understand? What were they scanning for? I don't know, and maybe that's the point. I was working the late shift at Millie's Diner in Ashland, Oregon. The night was slow, with only a few truckers and night owls scattered around the old roadside diner. Neon signs buzzed quietly, and the vinyl booth seats were cracked from years of use. My name's Dan, and I've been working here for a few years. It started like any other quiet night. I was going about my usual routine when something felt off. A black sedan had been following me, slowing down and speeding up, always staying close. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe they were just lost. But the more I tried to lose them, the closer they seemed to get. I turned off the highway onto a smaller road, pulling into a gas station. Maybe I could figure out what was going on. The black sedan stopped about 20 yards behind me, engine idling. As I filled my tank, I kept watching the car. The driver remained completely still, just staring. When I finished, I climbed back into my Jeep. Something strange kept me from just driving away. After a minute, the passenger window rolled down with a quiet hiss. A man in his mid-40s appeared, clean-shaven, wearing a black suit and dark shirt. His eyes were calm but sharp, no smile on his face. "You saw something you shouldn't," he said quietly. I blinked, caught off guard. "I don't know what you mean," I replied. "Drive carefully from now on," he warned. Then the window rolled up, and the car disappeared into the darkness, like it had melted into the night. My heart was racing. I hadn't noticed anything unusual during my trip, at least nothing I'd admit to seeing. But the man's look and tone left no doubt he was serious. I didn't chase or follow. I just started my Jeep and drove home, constantly checking my rearview mirror. I'm not sure if it was a warning or a threat, but since that night, I've become more aware of the quiet things. Shadows moving just out of sight, distant hums in the desert night. I don't talk about it much. It's the kind of story people either don't believe or look at you differently for telling. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I see distant headlights on the horizon. And I wonder if that black sedan is still out there somewhere, watching. It was a typical night at the diner, rain falling softly outside and blurring the neon lights through foggy windows. Around 11 p.m., 2 men in black suits walked in, the kind of attire you'd expect at a funeral or a secretive business meeting. One was tall with slicked back hair, the other shorter and older, wearing thin glasses and wearing a permanent frown. They ordered black coffee and sat by the window. I was going about my usual routine, wiping tables and making drinks, when something caught my attention. Their conversation wasn't casual small talk. They were discussing something serious about controlling a narrative and managing the fallout from a recent event. A few days earlier, the town had been buzzing about a strange light hovering over the old radio tower on the hill. People were calling it a UFO, but no one had solid proof or clear footage. The news seemed to be downplaying the incident, but these two men appeared deeply involved. I tried to listen without being obvious, continuing to clean nearby. The tall man suddenly glanced my way, and I froze mid-wipe. He didn't speak, but leaned closer to his companion and lowered his voice. "Curiosity can be dangerous," he muttered. Their cold, sharp eyes met mine, and I quickly nodded. "Got it," as if to show I wasn't interested. They finished their coffee rapidly and left without another word. I watched them disappear into the rainy night, their coats pulled tight, streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement. After their departure, something felt different. The diner's usual background noise seemed muted, like the walls were holding their breath. The next morning, there was no mention of the light anywhere. The radio tower stood as just another old structure on the hill. But I couldn't ache the feeling that I'd accidentally stumbled into something much larger than a random late-night conversation. I've never shared this story with anyone. Who would believe a tale from a late-night diner? Yet sometimes, when it rains and the neon lights blur, I can't help but remember those men and their cryptic warning. The forest was quiet that morning when I woke up, but something felt off. My solo camping trip in northern Vermont had taken an unexpected turn. I'd come out here seeking solitude, a break from city noise, expecting nothing more than peaceful days and quiet nights in the woods. I'd found the spot carefully, a flat clearing near a creek, about 10 miles from the nearest town, accessed by a small logging road. The first night had been cold but unremarkable. Normal forest sounds, crickets, owls, wind through pine trees, had been my only companions. But the second day brought a strange chemical smell, like burnt rubber. No trucks had passed, no explanation seemed obvious. I brushed it off and went to sleep. Around 4 a.m., something woke me. Rustling outside my tent wasn't just animal movement, it was heavier, more deliberate. Footsteps, careful, slow. My heart raced as I listened in the dark, then everything went silent. An unnatural, deep silence. At dawn, I unzipped the tent and found a note pinned with a twig. "Go home," in messy block letters. Beyond the clearing's edge, a black sedan idled silently, engine humming, completely empty. No driver in sight. I called out, but my voice seemed swallowed by the woods, and in the blurring lights, I could have sworn I saw shadows standing by a distant tower, watching, waiting. I was driving through Red Rock Canyon on a Tuesday evening, just past sunset. Something felt weird in the open space. No movement from the car, no response. I wasn't sure if I should feel scared or confused. Like those moments in movies where you're paralyzed, unable to move despite wanting to run. I started walking toward the car, slow and cautious, trying to figure out if someone was hidden inside or if it had been abandoned. When I got closer, about 15 feet away, the engine suddenly cut off without warning or sound. I stopped and stared, taking in the thick silence. Scanning the tree line behind the car, I looked for any signs of how it might have arrived. Footprints, tire marks, anything. Nothing. No tracks in the dirt, no crushed grass, no indication it had driven in recently. Something wasn't right. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but no signal. I tried again. Still nothing. Then I noticed something odd about the woods beyond the car. The light looked different. A weird haze hung around that section of trees, like a thin fog that didn't move or change, just suspended there like a curtain. Unease crept over me. I decided to leave, grabbed my pack, and started walking back to my tent, glancing over my shoulder. No sign of anyone or anything. By the time I returned, the note was gone. No trace it had ever been there. My tent flap was zipped tight, exactly as I'd left it. I tried convincing myself I'd imagined the note or it had fallen off somehow, but the memory of the car and its surrounding silence felt too real. I packed up quickly. That faint, weird smell was back. I kept looking behind me the whole time. When I reached my truck, parked several hundred yards down the logging road, I checked the rear view mirror. For a moment, I thought I saw headlights coming through the trees, but when I turned around, nothing was there. I drove straight back to town, not stopping until I hit the main highway. I told a few friends later, but they brushed it off. Probably a prank, wildlife, or just nerves. I don't know. I've been back to that area a couple times since, but never near that clearing. I haven't seen the black car again or that note, but every time I think about it, the quiet engine running with no one inside The mysterious note on my tent, it just doesn't make sense. The canyon road was quiet as the evening settled in, light fading and shadows stretching long and dark. I was heading home from a work trip in Vegas, taking the scenic route to clear my head. These narrow, winding roads flanked by steep sandstone cliffs were far better than the freeway, especially at this time of year when barely anyone else was around. Around 7:30, something caught my eye. Just past a sharp bend, an old black sedan without plates was parked. Not a typical sight in the middle of nowhere. I slowed down, half expecting a roadblock or construction, but nothing official indicated why the car was there. Two men stepped out, both wearing black suits and dark sunglasses despite the low sun. The tall one, maybe in his early 40s, and the shorter one, late 30s, walked directly to my window as if they'd been waiting. No smile, just a direct statement. Road ahead is closed for maintenance. You'll have to turn back. I blinked and looked up the road. Nothing unusual. No workers, no barriers, no equipment. When I mentioned I didn't see any signs, the shorter man flatly said it was a private job with no exceptions. I tried to explain I needed to get home, but the tall guy was firm. We can't let you through. It's not safe. The canyon around us was completely empty. No lights, no sounds, just quiet rocks against the fading sky. Their car was entirely black, with no visible windows, no license plates, no markings. Something felt off, but I kept my voice steady. "How long is this maintenance?" I asked. "Indefinite," came the short reply. I sighed and started to back up slowly, glancing repeatedly in the rearview mirror. When I looked again, both men were already back in their car. The sedan started to move, but when I shifted gears and looked over my shoulder, the car had vanished. No engine sound, no lights, nothing. Just empty road and canyon walls. No tire marks, no evidence they'd ever been there. I stopped, hands gripping the wheel, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The canyon road had an eerie stillness that evening. Just after sunset, with the air crisp and skies clear, I was driving when something felt off. I pulled over at a wider spot, stepped out, and surveyed the landscape. Nothing seemed unusual. No barriers, no equipment, just quiet. Dry brush rustled occasionally in the wind. I checked my phone. No signal. Walking a bit up and down the road, I searched for any tracks or signs that might explain the strange situation. Finding nothing, I returned to my car and started driving back the way I came. The sky deepened to a rich blue, with the first stars emerging. About 10 minutes into the drive, a strange light caught my attention. Low and steady, it hovered just above the canyon rim. This wasn't like any aircraft I'd seen. It didn't move, just glowed softly, almost like a suspended lantern. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, but the light remained, seeming to follow me at the edge of my vision. At the canyon's entrance, I stopped at a small diner. Only the night cook, Sam, was there. When I described my experience, he listened without surprise. "You're not the first to see things like that out here," he said cryptically. He mentioned lights, mysterious figures, and roads that seemingly vanish without explanation. Leaving with an unsettled feeling, I drove home, constantly checking my mirrors for the black sedan or the two men I'd encountered earlier. But the road was empty. Once home, I checked news and county road updates. Nothing unusual, just standard warnings about road conditions. In the following days, I shared the story with friends. Some joked about government agents or aliens, but I remained uncertain. Then, a couple of days later, I discovered a small blank piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. I folded it and left it on the dashboard, untouched. The entire experience lingered in my mind, a puzzle with no clear resolution. I was out on the dock behind my house, late at night, trying to snap some star photos with my phone. Everything was calm and quiet, the way it usually is. While scrolling through my pictures, something caught my eye out on the lake. A dark shape hung motionless just above the water's surface. This wasn't like any bird or aircraft I'd seen before. No blinking lights, no sound, just a solid, sharp silhouette against the sky. When I zoomed in with my camera, I could see it was a smooth, matte black oval shape. For a few minutes, it remained completely still. Then, without warning, it began drifting slowly sideways. Suddenly, it shot straight up and vanished into the darkness. I was left feeling both unnerved and intrigued. A few days later, a strange black car appeared at the end of my driveway. An older model from the early 2000s, it looked pristine, no dents, no license plate. What struck me as odd was the complete lack of tire tracks or footprints around it. The gravel looked untouched. I checked the car. Empty. No keys, no sign of anyone. Each morning, it was in exactly the same spot. I started leaving notes on the windshield, but they remained untouched. The car just sat there, silent and black. Then one evening, while sitting on my porch after dinner, I heard gravel crunching. A man in a neat black suit stood at the end of my driveway, his face shadowed by the streetlight. He just stood there, watching me, saying nothing. Something about this entire sequence of events felt deeply unsettling. The unexplained object on the lake, the mysterious car, this silent watcher, none of it made sense. But I knew something strange was happening. I started noticing strange things after that night on the porch. The car would appear every morning, but the man who spoke those cryptic words never returned. My phone would sometimes show static or weird glitches when I tried to take pictures of the lake. Late at night, I'd hear a faint humming sound coming from the water, but when I went outside, it would stop. Around 3 a.m. one night, I saw faint lights flickering over the lake. They were different from before, a soft blue glow, pulsing slowly. I grabbed my phone to capture the moment, but the screen went black and then froze. When I looked up again, the lights had vanished. He had approached me on the porch earlier, saying in a low voice, "The water remembers." I blinked, confused. "What?" he repeated. "The water remembers." Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I ran inside and locked the door, spending the rest of the night watching out the window, but he never came back. I haven't seen the man since that night, and the car stopped showing up. But something lingers. When I'm near the water, I get this feeling of being watched, like something's just below the surface waiting. Those words keep echoing in my mind. It wasn't a planned trip when I went to the old airfield. Just a spur-of-the-moment decision one Friday night. The place had been shut down for years, just some cracked runways and empty hangars near Milltown, a small town in western Kansas. I'd driven past it many times, thinking it might be a good spot for night sky photography. I arrived around 10 p.m. The wind was light but steady, and the sky was clear, that kind of cold, dry air you get on early spring nights. I brought my old camcorder, the one I'd used back in college before phones took over. Setting it up on a tripod at the edge of the main runway, I started filming the horizon, hoping to capture something interesting. Meteors, satellites, airplanes, whatever. I was out by the runway that night, camcorder in hand, when the sky started to get strange. And lights drifted silently overhead, moving in weird patterns that didn't make sense. They weren't like normal aircraft. No blinking lights, no engine sounds. Sometimes they'd flicker or vanish completely, only to reappear somewhere else. My curiosity was stronger than any fear. I zoomed in with the camera, trying to capture what was happening. The lights seemed almost responsive, shifting as if aware of my attention. An odd chill settled around me, different from any wind. The air felt heavy, different. That's when I saw him. Behind the rusted chain-link fence separating the runway from the service road, a man in a black suit stood motionless. No tie, just a dark jacket and slacks, blending into the shadows. He was completely out of place in this isolated spot. I called out, keeping my voice steady. "Can I help you? Are you lost?" No response. Then, impossibly, he stepped through the fence without a sound. No climbing, no movement, just sudden proximity. 6 feet away now, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a single piece of paper. When he handed it to me, I saw it was blank, completely empty. I looked up to ask what this meant, but he had vanished. No trace, no footprints, nothing. I glanced back at the sky. The mysterious lights were gone too, as if they'd never existed. I sat in my car afterward, the blank paper in my pocket, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Something had occurred, something I couldn't explain. I lived just outside a small town in Ohio, near one of those old power plants they built in the 70s. Not exactly picturesque, but it's part of the scenery here. For years, I'd gone out shooting landscapes and night skies around the plant. Sometimes the big cooling towers with their steam clouds looked kind of eerie in the dark, and I liked capturing that. Nothing special, just a hobby. It was a Wednesday. I had the night off work, and the sky was clear, but colder than usual for spring. I took my camera and tripod and drove out to a spot a couple miles from the plant near the edge of the woods where I could get a good view. I was hoping for some decent long exposure shots of the stars and maybe the steam glowing under the moonlight. I set up and started snapping photos, waiting for the right moment. Nothing out of the ordinary for a while. Just the usual hum of distant machinery and the occasional sound of a train far off. Then, around 11 p.m., I noticed something moving near the horizon behind the plant. At first, it looked like a faint glow, but then it shifted slow, almost floating. I pointed my camera in that direction, zoomed in, and started taking pictures. The light moved erratically, pulsing dimly between blue and green. It didn't make any noise I could hear. I tried to focus, but the light kept flickering in and out. I took several shots, some in bursts. I even switched to video for a bit just to see if the camera picked up more than my eyes could. Then a man appeared, just like that, out of nowhere. He walked right up to me and handed me a piece of paper. I didn't see where he came from or how he got there. He was just suddenly standing next to me, silent. I looked down at the paper, but when I looked back up, he was gone. Back at home, I checked the footage. The camcorder had recorded everything, the strange lights moving, and then the sudden silence when the man appeared, but there was no sign of the paper or the moment he gave it to me. It was like the camera missed that part completely. I told a couple of friends, but they just laughed it off as a prank or my imagination. Even now, I don't know what I saw or who that man was. I don't think I'll ever go back to that airfield. But sometimes when I'm outside at night, I swear I see lights moving just out of the corner of my eye, watching. I'm not someone who usually chases weird stuff. I mean, I like a good mystery as much as the next guy, but I don't go looking for trouble. That night changed something, though. It wasn't a bright flash or a loud boom, just quiet, strange things that didn't add up. A weird prickling sensation crept up my neck, like something was watching me. I tried to ignore it, blaming the night air. After about 10 minutes, the mysterious light vanished without a sound or trace. I packed up and drove home, feeling uneasy, but attributing my discomfort to the cold. The next day, I loaded the photos onto my computer. Instantly, something felt wrong. The files existed, but every single image of the light was corrupted, just blank, black screens. I tried everything, different card readers, recovery software, even a new computer. Nothing worked. It was as if the photos had been deliberately erased. That night, sitting in my living room and staring at my camera bag, a sharp knock interrupted my thoughts. 2 men in expensive black suits stood at my door. They didn't introduce themselves. One held out a business card, but it was blank. The other spoke quietly, almost conspiratorially. Some lights aren't meant to be captured. My heart raced. They weren't threatening, but their demeanor was chillingly serious. Before I could respond, they turned and vanished down the street. I locked the door, hands shaking, and examined the card. Just a faint smudge where text should have been. Since that night, something has changed. Whenever I go near the power plant, an unsettling feeling of being watched overwhelms me. The machinery's hum sounds different, like it's concealing a secret. I never saw those men again, and the photos remained missing. I don't understand what that light was or who those men were. I'm done taking pictures out there. Some things, I've learned, are better left unseen. The night was cold and foggy, with dim streetlights casting a hazy glow over the quiet neighborhood. No cars moved, just distant dogs barking, breaking the silence. I was half asleep when they arrived. 2 men in black suits and dark glasses, their faces as blank as a movie scene. They didn't waste time on introductions. "We need to check your yard," one said in a calm but firm voice that suggested no room for argument. Something felt off. No badges, no IDs, just a sense that questioning them wouldn't be wise. I stepped outside, locking the door behind me. One moved quickly toward the backyard, scanning everything with intense focus. The other stayed near the door, watching me closely. I tried peering over the fence, but could only see my old garden shed and a few bushes. Minutes passed in tense silence. Suddenly, he called me over. "Please stay inside," he instructed. When I asked why, he simply replied, "Standard procedure, polite yet unquestionable." I complied, retreating back into the house. From the window, I watched as the fog thickened. They pulled out heavy black bags from their coats, like forensic equipment. One carefully approached something near the shed, methodically wrapping it up. The object was small, but I couldn't make out what it was. I reached for my phone to call the police, but the screen went black. No signal. Time seemed to crawl, the tension unbearable. As silently as they'd appeared, the men walked back to the front. One gave me a brief, almost warning nod before they vanished. Their car was nowhere. Not when they arrived, not when they left. After they disappeared, I stepped outside. The yard looked untouched, except for a faint scuff mark near the shed. No footprints, no evidence of what they'd collected. Back inside, I locked the door and sat down, my mind racing, trying to understand the strange encounter that had just unfolded. I was walking home late one night, the street quiet and slightly foggy. One of those evenings where something feels off, but you can't explain why. Near the end of the block, a black car caught my eye, parked by the curb. What drew my attention wasn't the vehicle itself, but its occupants. Two men sat in the front seats, dressed in black suits and those old-fashioned top hats. At first, I thought it might be some kind of costume party or strange prank, but when I looked closer, I realized something was terribly wrong. Their faces weren't faces at all, just smooth, featureless skin where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, like someone had completely erased their features. I froze momentarily, then started walking faster. My instinct was not to look back, but curiosity won out. When I glanced over my shoulder, the car had vanished. No trace remained. No lights, no engine sound, no tire marks. Just an empty street shrouded in fog. The next day, I checked my yard thoroughly. Nothing seemed disturbed or missing, but a strange scuff mark lingered. I've never seen those men again, and I don't know what they might have been looking for. Yet something nags at me. A feeling that something else was out there, watching, waiting. I didn't sleep that night. The fog outside grew thick and remained until dawn. I apologize, but it seems like the original text you intended to share is incomplete or missing. Could you please provide the full text that you would like me to rewrite? Without the complete context, I cannot effectively restructure the paragraph while maintaining its original meaning.